Chapter 1639. Clatter, 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 clatter. Countless spectating cultivators saw this scene, and their teeth and bodies trembled. They were so shocked that their guts almost broke. We've underestimated Kong Teichu. This is a battle of attrition. The cultivators who participated in the war were prepared to die, and they were willing to fight for their country. Zhou Kaiwen was suddenly enlightened. The corners of his eyes twitched, and his face turned pale. Cold sweat trickled down his face. The empire of the ruins of immortality required nascent soul cultivators to be more than 500 years old or have a lot of children. Those who were too young or only had one child were not allowed. Before, Zhou Kaiwen didn't meet the requirements and was excluded. He couldn't figure it out and was unwilling to accept it. But then he finally understood. Thousands of flying swords. Can Kong Teichu withstand them? The Zhao sisters still didn't give up and looked at the sky. Although the Haotian sword sect had been destroyed, they didn't lose their Dharma power and the flying swords were still shooting towards Jiang Tian. They saw. When the densely packed flying swords were less than 100 meters away from Jiang Tian was still as calm as ever. His expression didn't even change. He just opened his right hand and lightly shouted, "Let's go!" Freeze. It was like the ancient celestial emperors had heavenly laws in their mouths, and they were like the Taoist lords and Buddhas, whose words were law and controlled the myriad of worlds. As soon as he said that, the flying swords immediately froze in the air. Even though the runes on them were still flickering and emitting light, they were still unable to move. Jiang Tian used the sea-calming divine law to control the space and lock them in place. Then, Jiang Tian waved his hand casually. Rumble. The space was boiling and thousands of flying swords suddenly moved, whistling in the sky and piercing towards the army that was rushing over. Miserable screams rose and fell one after another. Explosions shook the heavens and earth. Severed limbs flew into the air like large waves splashing about. It was also like a surging tide. It was a wave of flesh and blood formed from cultivators being cut into pieces. In fact, the Dharma powers of those flying swords wouldn't have been able to penetrate the battleships of the Dao artifact level. However, after Jiang Tian injected a trace of the Kunpeng divine law into them, the dimension was immediately annihilated and the yin and yang were separated. Those battleships with dense rune arrays that could withstand several nuclear explosions became sieves with countless holes and cuts. The cultivators inside were all pierced and shattered beyond recognition. In this vast sea of flying swords, no one was an exception. They were all turned into meat paste. Also, Jiang Tian's divine sense was too powerful. Although it seemed like a casual attack, it was actually very well controlled. It turned into 3,000 strands of Dharma power. The thousands of flying swords all had their own targets and trajectories. They were extremely precise. Every nascent soul cultivator had their nascent soul and divine soul destroyed. In earth-shattering screams, all the cultivators on the battleships and flying ships died. The wreckage of these war machines fell into the sea with a large amount of black smoke and fire, setting off monstrous waves. Blood dyed the sea red, and broken bones and minced flesh were densely packed. It was a shocking sight, and the pungent smell of blood soared into the sky. Clang, clang. At the same time, the attacks from all kinds of long-range Dharma artifacts also surged. Jiang Tianxin waved his hand and all the powerful Dharma powers and attacks were blown away like dust, disappearing without a trace. It's too terrifying. The cultivators who were watching the battle almost went crazy. Is he still human? He swept away the attacks of Dao artifacts with a wave of his hand. Zhou Kaiwen's scalp was numb and cold sweat poured down his forehead. He was simply a peerless demon, the god of plagues, evil and terrifying to the extreme. He only attacked twice and killed the 10,000 cultivators of the floating mountain sect. Just one slash. Let the thousands of men and horses turn into meat paste, blood rain, ashes and dust. Zhao Na felt goosebumps all over her body and a chill went up her spine to the top of her head, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. I'm worried. Will the defense line at the back still fight to the death? Kong Teichu is too powerful. Zhao Rou was not confident. Cultivators were also human and had not transcended to become immortals. If they wanted to live forever, they would of course be afraid of death. Would the cultivators at the back still hold on after seeing how terrifying Jiang Tian was? At this moment, she was so scared that her legs were weak and she almost wet herself. After all, she was the saintess of the grotto heaven and had seen many big scenes and experienced countless killings and bloodshed. Even she could not withstand it and almost ran away, let alone the other cultivators. Kill! So many subordinates, friends and family members died, but Zhao Tulong's expression did not change. He was extraordinarily calm, as if he had forgotten everything and only had Jiang Tian in his eyes. With a dragon-like roar, he stepped on a flood dragon and charged through the sky with a halberd. When the halberd stabbed over, a vast law immediately appeared. A mighty and domineering law dragon appeared, incomparably condensed and real, vivid and lifelike. The law dragon was 100 feet long and its head was like a mountain. It opened its black hole-like mouth and roared. Sound waves rolled and rippled and distorted space. It shook its head and wagged its tail, waving its sharp claws in the sky as it tore through space and attacked Jiang Tian. Not to mention other things, the sound wave attack of the dragon-shaped law was enough to compete with the Fu Heishui brothers. You can't withstand a single blow. Jiang Tian let out a cold snort and charged forward. With a boom, the law dragon exploded from head to tail like a string of firecrackers. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Tian rushed in front of Zhao Tulong, stepped on the flood dragon's head, and grabbed the tip of the halberd. Die! Zhao Tulong was resolute. He roared and did not shake the halberd. Instead, he chose to self-destruct. Bang! There was a bang. It was earth-shattering, as if a star had exploded in the sky. A gigantic fireball appeared in the sky, and streaks of dragon-shaped radiance shot out. It was like the sun's corona was wantonly sprinkling down, and everything within 1,000 miles was trembling. The many floating mountains were forced back by the bombardment. They were forced to retreat for over 5 kilometers. Even the fortresses that were filled with Dao runes were cracked. Many of the cultivators hidden within coughed out blood. The half-soul formation level dragon under their feet turned into a bloody mist in a second, spreading in the air. Zhao Tulong is indeed the lord of a guardian family. He still has the strength to kill Jiang Tian, but he still chose to self-destruct. Such a resolute heart. No wonder he's called a god and the glory of a guardian. The master of the Monster King Hall and the medicine gods spat out blood and their cultivation levels dropped, even though they were soul formation cultivators. But they were full of admiration. So ruthless. A soul formation cultivator chose to die together with his enemy. Kong Teichu, although you have a strong body and the best melee combat, if all the soul formation cultivators in the ruins of deity choose to self-destruct, how many nails can you crush even if you're made of diamond? The Zhao sisters and Zhou Kaiwen in the Tianmong Grotto Heaven were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe it. When they realized what was going on, they felt that Jiang Tian would definitely suffer a great loss this time. Swish! Jiang Tian was sent flying up and down like a withered leaf in the wind. He was sent flying dozens of miles away. The power of the self-destruction of a god was comparable to an attack from a void return saint. That was the power of the precepts, compressed to the extreme, and exploded in an instant. Even the chaotic divine body couldn't withstand it. Jiang Tian was immediately covered in blood. His skin was torn and his flesh was broken. Even his organs were injured. Blood came out of the corner of his mouth. He's not dead. For a moment, Zhou Kaiwen and the others who were watching could not believe their eyes. They were dumbfounded. The power of the self-destruction of a god was unimaginable. It had only happened a few times in the history of the ruins of deity. Every time it happened, it would destroy the world and destroy cities and countries. No matter how powerful a soul formation cultivator was, he couldn't withstand the power of the self-destruction of a god. It was like the power of a god that had been accumulated for 10,000 years. How terrifying was that? But Jiang Tian only vomited blood. But they didn't know. Jiang Tian had a chaotic divine body, which was almost indestructible. It was extremely rare for him to be injured like this. Great! Kong Techu is not invincible, is he? I'm willing to crush a god just to cut off one of his arms. The divine alchemist roared, waved the virtuous banner, broke through space, and chased after Jiang Tian. Medicine god. You! While everyone was crying and the disciples were crying, the medicine god also chose to self-destruct in front of Jiang Tian. The merit flag in his hand also exploded. Clang. Although Jiang Tian had used the gung metal divine rule to form a shield to block the power of the god's self-destruction, the power of the god's self-destruction was too great. However, the power of a god's self-destruction was too great, and the other party's movements were too fast. Jiang Tianjing's shield of golden god rule had just been formed, and after holding on for 3 seconds, it suddenly cracked open. The divine alchemist's violent virtuous thoughts, vast laws, and heavy power of faith crashed onto Jiang Tian's body like a flash flood or a heavenly river bursting its banks. Jiang Tian retreated another 5 kilometers. One of his arms shattered. Blood dyed the sky red. Sparkling and translucent chunks of flesh flew in all directions. White bone stubble could be seen, and it was extremely terrifying. How can the medicine god die? I don't believe it. He has attained the Tao for 3,000 years. After he became a god, he granted every request and took it upon himself to save the world. The ruins Emperor's palace must have a way to revive the medicine god, right? He once walked the world barefoot like an ascetic monk. He healed the world and saved the people from disaster. He once cut his flesh for medicine and bones for pills just to save a mortal. He once licked the sores of the sick. He sacrificed himself to save others. He loved the world and blessed it. He was a saint. And now, the god who self-destructed to kill the evil Kong Techu has perished. His spirit lives on forever. His name shines through the ages. Medicine god, how can you die? My beloved medicine god. Kong Techu, you evil man. You are worse than a beast. You have the heart of a wolf and the lungs of a dog. You even killed a good man like the medicine god. You will die a horrible death. You will be punished by the heavens. At that moment, be it the cultivators watching from a close distance or the cultivators and mortals watching the screen, they felt a sharp pain in their hearts. Some cried tears of blood, some knelt on the ground and howled while others cursed loudly. They drew their swords and looked at the sky, wishing they could grind Jiang Tian's bones to dust. Mighty medicine god. Kong Techu, you are a great evil in the world. The billions of people in the ruins of immortality are sworn enemies with you. They will not rest until you are dead. Everyone must kill you. It could be said that at that moment, be it the high-ranking members of the royal family, aristocrats, ministers, generals, cultivators from the sects and family clans, or the common people, all of them felt their blood boil as they felt an upheaval in their hearts. They were extremely impressed with Zhao Tulong and the medicine god, but they also hated Jiang Tian to the core. The medicine god was a good man, a saint. He was selfless and detached from worldly affairs. Their sacrifice could be said to have ignited the flames of revenge. The entire ruins of immortality was like a large barrel of explosives that had been ignited. They wanted to blast Jiang Tian to smithereens. All the cultivators and mortals swore that if they were united, even if they died 100 times, fell into an eternal hell, or suffered endless torment, they would kill Jiang Tian. Chapter 1640. Although Kong Techu's body is strong, he was injured by the self-destruction of a god. Obviously, he's not invincible. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality are not afraid of death. Will fight to the last man. At this moment, Prince Xiahe was mobilizing the troops for war. His deep voice, filled with infinite determination, echoed in the defense lines, between the fortresses, and in the hearts of billions of cultivators through the communication artifacts. He had become the acting divine emperor of the ruins Emperor Palace. Star Lord Tianhe was supporting him with all his might. On the front line of the Void Mountain. Great. You're as tough as steel and ruthless as ever. Once you attack, kill with all your might and don't hold back at all. That's the true nature of cultivators. Jiang Tian's arm was covered in blood. He swayed as if he were standing on a small boat in a stormy sea. He managed to stabilize himself, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he clapped his hands in admiration. His face was slightly stern, and killing intent gradually emerged in his eyes. He lowered his head and muttered to himself. The descendant of the wood spirit planet and the cultivators of the ruins of immortality are worthy of being Kang Teichu's opponent. After that, on Jiang Tian's arm, a drop of blood bloomed like a blooming flower, expanding unceasingly. Various kinds of primal chaos laws interweaved with each other. The essence qi, broken bones, and blood mist that had been scattered in the air were all rolled back at a speed visible to the naked eye. A brand new arm was born immediately, as if it had never been injured. He was reborn with a drop of blood and a new body. I heard that the Ruins Emperor's descendants have 9 heavenly arts. The secret of swordsman is a healing sacred art, but in my opinion, it's just SOSO. Jiang Tian chuckled and said with a hint of mockery. But at that moment, nobody in the entire ruins of immortality could refute him. The wound on Jiang Tian's broken arm had many powerful Dharma laws intertwined and even grand Tao fragments left behind. They kept running, swallowing, suppressing, killing and hurting Jiang Tian's body, blood and mind Dharma power. Even a peak stage soul formation cultivator would find it difficult to get rid of them. After all, they were left behind by the self-destruction of a god. They were extremely condensed and firm, not to mention recovering them. As for Jiang Tian, he was able to repair his body in the blink of an eye. This was simply too adorable. He was like an innate god, the Lord of creation. In the next moment, he suddenly raised his head, and his eyes seemed to flash with a cold bolt of lightning that was extremely terrifying. Everyone who saw it felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over their heads, and they felt a chill from head to toe. A ferocious battle intent rose rapidly and soared into the sky, as if it could tear the sky apart and shatter the moon. I will slaughter all the descendants of the wood spirit star, leaving no trace of their bloodline, as a sign of my utmost respect to the wood spirit star civilization. In the next moment, Jiang Tian pointed in the air. A loud smack was heard. The body of Demon Imperial Hall Master stiffened, and a mixture of blood and brain matter burst out from her forehead. Her charming and enchanting face was filled with anger and disbelief. She wanted to self-destruct, but it was already too late. A surge of primal chaos god law attacked her to the extreme, exploding inch by inch inside and outside her corporeal body. Even a god was powerless to extinguish it. Then, Jiang Tian coldly glanced at the floating mountain. A sword sweep. The sword qi swept across 30,000 miles, and the laws of sword were at least 1,000 feet long. As it swept across, the entire world was split into 2 parts, and a terrifying crack appeared. Between the upper and the lower space fragments whizzed and a space storm was born, which could easily kill a soul formation cultivator. The space cracks created by the slash kept spreading, and in the blink of an eye, many floating mountains were slashed. The floating mountains were instantly split into 2 halves. All the mountains, all the fortresses, all the restrictive arrays, and all the cultivators were instantly reduced to meat paste, blood rain, broken bones, and broken souls. Then, the mountains, fortresses, restrictive arrays, and warships that were unstable because of the destruction of the rune arrays exploded at the same time, turning into clusters of flames that fell into the deep sea. At this moment, the cultivators of the Zhao family, the Haotian Sword sect, the Medicine God sect, and the Demon Imperial Hall, as well as the defensive line of the floating mountain. Everything was wiped out. At this moment, the entire ruins of deity was in dead silence. Then, there was an uproar. On the defensive line of the floating mountain in the Far East Ocean, all the heroes were wiped out. Not a single person survived. All of them turned into blood rain and broken bones. The fortresses, arrays, chariots and buildings that had been built with countless resources turned into broken walls and scrap metal, falling into the deep sea with black smoke. Waves rose and there were explosions at the bottom of the sea from time to time. Those were the runes of the Dharma artifacts that were destroyed and exploded again. The air was filled with the strong smell of blood and smoke. Looks like I've underestimated the dynasty of the ruins of deity. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered. Jiang Tian looked at his right arm that was intact as before, and there was unprecedented coldness in his eyes. A civilization that had been through so many disasters was able to survive for so long. This civilization must have been a very tough race that never lacked ruthlessness and decisiveness. Jiang Tian fought against a dynasty alone because he wanted to use the cultivators of the ruins of deity as a whetstone to refine himself and advance to the limit, saving resources for when he entered the central galaxy in the future. At the same time, he also wanted to slowly torture the cultivators of the ruins of deity and make them feel pain and regret. He wanted to take revenge for the ancient heavenly courts and make them pay the price for invading back then. But he didn't know that the cultivators of the dynasty of the ruins of deity weren't to be trifled with. They attacked like a thunderbolt and didn't hesitate to detonate their deities to kill Jiang Tian. Their ruthlessness and decisiveness were comparable to that of the cultivators of the central galaxy. The battle between civilizations and the hatred between races wasn't a joke. It was a cruel battle of life and death. Not to mention the cultivation world. Even in the mortal countries without a cultivation civilization, every time a dynasty changed and every race expanded, wasn't blood flowing and millions of corpses lying on the ground? Wasn't it a tragedy that shook the heavens and moved the earth? The dynasty of the ruins of deity had never underestimated Jiang Tian. They had done their best and used all their resources from the beginning. Now, it was time for the final battle and they were already in a frenzy. It's just that it's also strange. I've already revealed that I can solve the problem of the third planet of the South Gate. They're not doomed. They should have negotiated with me for a chance at survival and begged for mercy. Why are they so ruthless and decisive? They're willing to fight to the death even if all of them are killed. Jiang Tian was also confused for a moment. The intense reaction of the cultivators of the ruins of deity didn't make sense. Cultivators climbed the long immortal path and all they wanted was to live a long life. They valued their lives more than anything else. There were very few things that could make them risk their lives. Maybe they still don't believe that I can solve the crisis of the third planet of the South Gate. After all, reincarnation is illusory. Jiang Tian shook his head and threw all his thoughts to the back of his head. A glint of coldness flashed in his eyes and he snorted. Don't think about that. No matter what, I'll kill whoever stands in front of me with my sword. Do you think this battle of life and death is a monkey show? Suddenly, Jiang Tian glanced in all directions with his divine consciousness and shouted coldly. He stepped on the void and soared into the sky. At the same time, he patted the sky-devouring demonic gourd at his waist. Thousands of flying swords flew out like silver hair. Then, they expanded in the wind and scattered in all directions like willow leaves and silver fish. At this moment, after seeing the tragic and bloody battle, seeing tens of thousands of cultivators crushed by Jiang Tian in the blink of an eye, and seeing the defense line of the floating island destroyed by Jiang Tian, the Zhao sisters, Zhou Kaiwen, and the other cultivators who were watching felt their hearts tremble. He can kill soul formation cultivators with a flick of his finger. Even the self-destruction of a soul formation cultivator can't do anything to him. Yeah, the self-destruction of a god is equivalent to a casual attack from a void return cultivator. They were all terrified, like mortals who saw a fiend god. They felt how small they were and how powerful and terrifying Jiang Tian was. He's too powerful. It seems that no one in this world can stop him. I'm worried that the ones behind. Zhou Kaiwen wanted to say something but stopped. His hair stood on end and his scalp was numb. His heart almost jumped out of his throat. He felt very depressed and frightened. The reason was simple. The defense lines behind were about the same strength as this one. They might not be able to withstand it. His recovery ability is too terrifying. Is it like the legendary immortal golden body that can't be destroyed by any spells and Tao? It's like a real immortal Buddha. Zhao Rou's cold and unworldly face, which seemed to be unable to ripple, was now twisted with shock, confusion, horror, and disbelief. She knew that Jiang Tian was very powerful. After all, even the headmaster, the sword god, and many grotto heaven cultivators had been killed by him. He was already known as the most powerful cultivator in the ruins of immortality. Even the three giants had been defeated by him. But she didn't expect Jiang Tian to be so powerful. Even the self-destruction of a god couldn't injure him, let alone kill him. The blood feud between my father and brother is too deep. I'm afraid. Zhao Na looked miserable and her heart was filled with despair and sadness. At the moment, Jiang Tian gave her the feeling that he was unshakable, like the sun in the sky shining brightly. While everyone was having mixed feelings and wanted to leave the viewing area. Are you all treating this battle of life and death as a monkey show? Jiang Tian's voice was filled with displeasure, and it carried a powerful divine sense pressure. It was like a mountain flood, a heavenly river bursting its banks and rolling down. Chapter 1641. Senior's divine power is so powerful that we admire you to the extreme. We don't mean any disrespect by watching and worshipping you here. Jiang Tian's soul-devourer divine sense was extremely terrifying. Everyone felt as if they were facing a heavenly might and couldn't bear it at all. Their hearts were cold and they trembled in fear. Their legs were like noodles and they couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Only Zhou Kaiwen was barely holding on. He clasped his hands, bowed deeply, and explained with a trembling voice. Zhao Rou and her sister's hearts were filled with resentment. This Kong Teichu was so domineering. Even when the royal family of the ruins of immortality was fighting, he couldn't stop other cultivators from watching. However, what made them collapse was yet to come. One after another, flying swords silently tore through the air and arrived. The speed was too fast. They didn't even have time to dodge before they were pierced through and minced into pieces. Flesh and blood flew in all directions, and miserable cries shook the heavens and earth. It was extremely tragic. All sorts of protective magical artifacts and divine ability laws were cut apart and exploded. In the blink of an eye, thousands of onlooking cultivators, whether it was their physical bodies, divine souls, golden cores, or nascent souls, were destroyed in an instant. Zhao Rou, Zhao Na, and the others still had their beautiful eyes wide open before they died, and they were filled with terror and astonishment. They seemed to not dare believe that they'd originally come over to watch Jiang Tian be killed to appease the anger in their hearts and relieve the hatred in their hearts, yet they'd actually been killed by Jiang Tian without knowing what was going on. In the next moment, their delicate bodies shattered like flowers. The flying boats, flying swords, and broken limbs that were covered in blood, flesh, and broken bones fell like a heavy downpour, dyeing the sea red again. Many blood-stained flying swords flashed with cold light as if they were sentient. They patrolled the sea for a while, and after making sure that no fish had escaped, they whistled and chased into the distance. Jiang Tian had already shot hundreds of miles away, heading straight for the second line of defense, Yenyun City in the Linhai province. At this time, the scene of the battle at the floating mountain line of defense had spread throughout the ruins of immortality. Billions of people were shocked and filled with disbelief. Jiang Tian's performance was too strong, especially when he could quickly recover from the self-destruction of the gods. It was terrifying to the extreme. The floating mountain sect had many soul formation cultivators and tens of thousands of cultivators above the nascent soul stage. With such a powerful lineup and meticulously set up restrictions and formations, even if Jiang Tian could break through, he would have to pay a heavy price. However, they never imagined that it would be such an outcome. It was as if they were destroying sand sculptures and clay dolls. They destroyed the entire line of defense and washed everything in blood. What kind of power was this? What kind of terrifying strength was this? Countless cultivators and mortals from the ruins of immortality gasped. Their faces became serious and worried. When they saw Zhao Rou and Zhou Kaiwen being killed by Jiang Tian, everyone was so angry that their lungs were about to explode. Their eyes were bloodshot, and their teeth were almost broken. Kong Teichu, you're so vicious. They're just spectators. Why do you have to kill the innocent? Kong Teichu, you have acted recklessly and killed the innocent. You have violated the laws of heaven. In the future, he will definitely suffer the backlash of his inner demon and explode to death. He's not human. They beat their chests and stomped their feet, shouting and cursing. They wanted to crush Jiang Tian's bones and scatter his ashes to vent their anger. Jiang Tian walked in the air, moving 100 miles in a second. He was like a sharp sword that cut through the throat and headed straight for the ruins of immortality. He didn't hide or pretend to be polite. The area tens of thousands of miles away from the ocean was the coastal province. This province was vast and had a large population. Its spirit chi was extremely rich, and there were many cultivation sections. It could be said that there were thousands of races and heroes. Each of them was dazzling and famous. Now, it attracted the attention of the entire ruins of immortality. Outside the majestic city of Swallow Cloud City, cultivators gathered and billions of people looked over. The West Tripod Sect, a soul formation sect master, 3 half-step soul formation elders and 600 nascent soul disciples. The High Tai Sect, 5 half-step soul formation grand elders came out of seclusion and led 600 nascent soul disciples to fight the enemy. Red Arrow City, 500 artifact grandmasters controlling 5,000 large-scale Dharma artifacts to stop Kong Teichu. The Hanliang Temple, 3 eminent monks with half-step soul formation power came out of seclusion to help. The Soul Controller family. The Soul Hunter Marquis led 100 nascent soul heavenly lords to attack. Many famous forces, sects, families and cities in the ruins of immortality were extremely powerful and had a deep foundation, but they were like moths to a flame, fighting against Jiang Tian. They took out all the treasures they had at the bottom of their chests. Many of them came from the era of the War of Dao Damage. Their power was extremely terrifying, and they were considered war artifacts. With a single strike, they could split open the heavens and destroy mountains and rivers. Some were forged in the style of the wood spirit star, while others were seized from the ancient heavenly court. Fight for our descendants and die for the continuation of our civilization. Die a worthy death. Listen to your own funeral song and turn into light rain. Return to the grand Tao of the world and end your dreams, just so you can die in peace. Even some living fossils that were about to run out of lifespan and were waiting for their chance were awakened. They walked out of their tombs and coffins with a decaying aura. They were wearing ancient clothes and seemed to have come from another era, but their eyes were firm and resolute. They had already accepted death and were about to unleash their last light and heat. Every force had the ability to kill more than one soul formation cultivator. At the moment, they were all rushing towards Jiang Tian. The defense line of the Shenkong mountain has been broken. Kong Teichu is very powerful. Today we might all die here. Don't worry. We'll die to kill Kong Teichu. Our names will be passed down through the ages. Sect Master of the West Cauldron Sect, your disciples seem to be full of fighting spirit. They're not afraid at all. Did you tell them about the expedition to Earth? That's top secret. Only overlords above the soul formation level can know about it. How can I give up my head so easily? It's simple. I'm just controlling my divine soul. Kong Teichu is very powerful. He can even resist the self-detonation of a god? How can we kill him? I don't think he can resist those ancient large-scale war artifacts. He has set up a divine thunder array 1,000 miles away. Even if the headmaster and the sword god come back to life, they won't be able to resist it. Many leaders had already received the news and were discussing. However, they were not afraid. Instead, they were full of killing intent and felt a sense of glory and excitement. They worked together to discuss how to kill Jiang Tian. Kaboom! Numerous heaven-shaking and earth-shaking explosions resounded out as numerous azure-colored lightning pillars that could hold up the heavens erupted from the ground and shot straight into the sky, and they shot towards the fighting bull, black tortoise, true dragon, white tiger, qilin, pishio, and qiongqi in unison. Divine lightning of various colors took on the shape of different divine beasts, and they were all enormous and heavy like mountains. They pierced through the earth, destroyed 30 kilometers tall mountains, and tore apart the sky as they surged and fought amidst their roars. He's here. At the same time, the artifact masters of Red Arrow City activated their large-scale doctrine artifacts with their immortal consciousnesses. The hundreds of arrow-like Dao artifacts were densely packed and covered the sky. They poured down indiscriminately like a heavy downpour. Instantly, the area within 1,000 miles turned into a sea of fire. The terrifying Dharma laws roared crazily. All kinds of dazzling fragments of the great Tao swept over and emitted dazzling light. Even the ancient array patterns on the ground were destroyed and torn apart. The earth shook violently and mushroom clouds rose to the sky. Even the second star of the south gate seemed to be about to fall. The world was in chaos and boiling. Even if the headmaster and the sword god come back to life, they will also be crushed. At this moment, many people had the same thought in their minds. Jiang Tian was certainly powerful, but he couldn't withstand such indiscriminate attacks. At that moment, all the forces in the entire province used all the doctrine artifacts and Dharma treasures they had accumulated for thousands of years. Not to mention one soul formation cultivator, even 4 or 100 soul formation cultivators would probably end up dead. After half the time it took for an incense stick to burn, they stopped unleashing their powers. Everyone was panting heavily as they saw a tall and imposing figure slowly walking out from the sea of flames. He was completely unharmed, and even his black robe was not stained by a single speck of dust. Chapter 1642. How can he resist? The moment they saw Jiang Tian walk out, everyone's pupils contracted. They were shocked and couldn't believe it, as if they had seen a demon. Is it that strange stone cauldron? Many soul formation cultivators realized what was going on and felt sad. It wasn't that they were afraid of death. They were already prepared to die, but they were worried that the entire ruins of deity couldn't kill Jiang Tian. Kong Teichu was too terrifying. With that kind of treasure, he seemed to be indestructible. At that moment, the stone cauldron above Jiang Tian's head was floating and rotating. The initial chaotic energy hung down like thousands of silk ribbons. Any Dharma laws or even Tao fragments that approached would be crushed immediately. They couldn't hurt Jiang Tian at all. You all know that you don't have long to live, so you only want to die. Facing tens of thousands of cultivators, Jiang Tian was still casual, as if he didn't care at all. He said with a mocking expression, "Your lives are worthless. You don't have to care about them. But I'm different from you. I have a beautiful country, a wife and children, and I still have to climb the long deity path to reach the top of the universe. I won't take such risks." The ancestral master of the West Cauldron sect was an old god who had lived for thousands of years and was about to die. He had stopped his blood circulation and his life had been stopped. At that moment, he was awakened. He was all skin and bones. In his deep eye sockets, his eyes flickered like ghost fire. That was the light of hatred and resentment. He roared and rushed toward Jiang Tian with a rotten aura. The battle cries were earth-shattering. Tens of thousands of cultivators' eyes flashed with endless determination. Their faces were as resolute as iron. They took out their Dharma treasures, flying swords, and turned into shocking rainbows that pierced through the sun and the moon. They whistled through the sky and rushed toward Jiang Tian. "I was going to exterminate your race. You should have waited quietly for your death. I didn't expect you to resist. But this is good. It's more interesting." Looking at the overwhelming figures and attacks, Jiang Tian's eyes flashed with a deep cold light. The chaotic energy in his body surged and his terrifying aura rose steadily. It was like a fluttering flag that swept across the sky, making him look like a demon and a god. Bang! Jiang Tian stomped his foot, causing the void to collapse. The curvature of space within a radius of 100 miles changed as it was directly annihilated. All sorts of spatial fragments erupted, forming a spatial storm. The thousands of cultivators that bore the brunt of the attack were all torn apart by the power of space in an instant, and they were like enormous balls of blood blooming in the air. Severed limbs flew in all directions, and crystalline bones shot in all directions. It was an incomparably tragic and magnificent sight. Then, Jiang Tian used the recoil force of the space warp to cross 100 miles and collided with the top forces of Linhai province. Looking from the sky, one could only see a dazzling chaotic divine radiance cleaving through the entire formation like a sharp blade. It pushed forward like a torpedo splitting the sea. The terrifying energy waves of Dharma laws that Jiang Tian released were spread to both sides along the way. Countless large Dharma artifacts were knocked back in the air and immediately fell apart. The cultivators exploded like fireworks and retreated like raging waves hitting the shore. Whether it was the ancient war machines, the large Tao artifacts, or the soul formation grand cultivators, they all exploded like firecrackers in front of Jiang Tian. All kinds of debris flew everywhere. He was in the mood to kill. Jiang Tian even released the 9 sky forms. The 9,000 feet tall sky forms walked in the world like demons and gods, spreading vast laws. Tens of thousands of cultivators and the elites of a province were crushed one after another, as if they were made of paper. Half an hour later, blood flowed like a river on the ground and severed limbs were piled up like mountains. The remains of all kinds of weapons, Dharma artifacts and chariots lay on the ground like mountains. The West Tripod sect, the Hai Tai sect, Red Arrow City and the Soul Hunter family were all destroyed. Not a single person was left alive. You're just a bunch of weaklings. Jiang Tian looked indifferent and his eyes were calm without a trace of emotion. His clothes were still spotless. He shook his clothes and rushed to the defense line behind him. Seeing this scene, the entire ruins of immortality fell into silence. Can Kang Taichu really sweep across thousands of miles and destroy the empire of the ruins of immortality? Could it be that he really wants to take over our home and take it for himself? A possibility that they had never thought of before came to their minds, making them tremble with fear. Above the ruins of immortality, there were a total of 6 lines of defense. However, Jiang Tian easily destroyed 2 of them. How could the other lines possibly stop Jiang Tian? In the fallen deity sea, the warriors who saw all this through the light screen were very excited. I thought His Majesty was too reckless and arrogant when he said that he could level the ruins of immortality in one day. I didn't expect His Majesty to be so powerful. We can do this. Yun Zhongzi's eyes lit up and he heaved a long sigh, full of respect and admiration. Ah, such a powerful battle record. Even the sages of the ancient heavenly courts can't compare to him. Niu Duotian also exclaimed. Celestial Emperor, this battle has allowed the native descendants of the immortal land to hold their heads high. We have wiped away our humiliation and avenged our predecessors who died in the Tao damage era. Tu Fei was so excited that his body trembled slightly. He clenched his fists again and couldn't wait to follow Jiang Tian to the battlefield and fight with the overlords of the ruins of immortality. Awesome! How delightful! Tian Shu was drunk and howled loudly. Sure enough, the remaining 3 lines of defense were easily destroyed by Jiang Tian, and they were forcefully torn apart. The 30 or so soul formation cultivators who tried to stop him all died. Some of them were like living fossils that had awakened from their graves. These living fossils had once been renowned throughout the ages, and they were like stars that flickered in the sky above the ruins of immortality. For the sake of waiting for a fortuitous encounter to extend their lifespans, they'd slumbered for a few hundred or 1,000 years and vanished without a trace. Now, they'd emerged once more, yet they were annihilated by Jiang Tian. More than 10,000 nascent soul heavenly lords had died and countless golden core cultivators and foundation establishment cultivators had died. There were at least 300,000 of them. This was a great battle that could be called the end of the world. It was like the war of the Tao damage era. It could be said that the world was in chaos. The sky was twisted and the mountains and rivers collapsed. On the ground, smoke rose to the sky and the prosperous cities were destroyed. Millions of corpses were lying on the ground and blood flowed like a river. The battle was so fierce that some planets were even affected and fell. All of this was too terrifying. The entire ruins of immortality was filled with a foul wind and a rain of blood. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, gloomy and gloomy. All sorts of thunderous booms rang out. Rain poured down from the heavens and the earth, and all sorts of mountain torrents erupted. It was as if the heavens and earth were howling, weeping, and furious. It wasn't an illusion, but a fact. Soul formation cultivators were gods in the human world. They were connected to the great Tao of the world and were one with the world. The gods in their bodies were like children born by God. But then they had died in a day. How could the world, as the parents of the gods, bear with it? The great Tao and Dharma laws were unstable, which led to all kinds of disasters. How can Kong Taechu be so powerful? He's just an ant from an abandoned planet. I heard that it's called the Wasteland. He was abandoned by the ancient heavenly courts. That's a god. He's high and omnipotent. He's born from the great Tao of the world and can live for thousands of years. How can he die? Is this an illusion? Kong Taechu, you're cruel and inhumane. You're worse than a beast. You're really a demon. God, send down the lightning tribulation and strike him to death with lightning. In the heavenly caves that hung high in the sky, in the sects that overlooked the common people, in the aristocratic clans that assisted the dynasty in guarding the country, in the streets and alleys, in the mountains and wilderness, it could be said that the entire ruins of immortality was filled with the sound of weeping. Hundreds of millions of people were wailing, crying, cursing and cursing. They were heartbroken and couldn't believe it. As gods in the human world, soul formation cultivators had many believers in the world who worshipped them devoutly. Soul formation cultivators didn't just enjoy the power of incense. They would also show miracles in the world for the people to use. Their idols and beliefs had been destroyed and they couldn't accept it. Such a loss was too heavy. More than half of the cultivators in the ruins of immortality had died. Even if they killed Jiang Tian, they wouldn't be able to recover to their peak state without 1,000 years of rest. Old Ruins Emperor, open your eyes and take a look. Your descendants and subjects are being slaughtered by an evil demon. Please wake up. O Ruins Emperor, O heavens, open your eyes. Send down the heavenly tribulation and the wrath of heaven. Let this despicable and cruel bastard die. Every city had a central square where the statues of the ruins emperors of the past stood. Cultivators and mortals often worshipped there. At that moment, the squares of all the cities were filled with people. Mortals and cultivators were kowtowing and praying with pious expressions. Sometimes, they would touch the ground with their foreheads and sometimes they would raise their arms and shout, condemning Jiang Tian. Kong Taechu is here. When Jiang Tian passed by a medium-sized city, the cultivators and mortals who were praying rushed towards Jiang Tian crazily. Kill him. Go to hell, demon. They roared as if they had gone mad. They didn't have much rationality. Even though they knew they couldn't afford to offend Jiang Tian, they still wanted to fight Jiang Tian to the death. If it weren't for the crisis of world destruction, the empire of the ruins of immortality would be a healthy cultivation empire with a superior system. That world extracted spirit chi from the lower world. It was like heaven with abundant resources and spirit chi. People lived and worked in peace. Even mortals could live for hundreds of years. Moreover, the system was superior, forming a centralized cultivation empire. Cultivators fought for mortals and soul formation cultivators were used by the people. They protected the peace of the world and were able to focus on important matters. Now, all of that was destroyed by Jiang Tian. Chapter 1643. Jiang Tian didn't show any mercy at all. He stomped his foot without any emotion on his face. At that moment, Jiang Tian's figure swayed and rapidly expanded. He was 100 feet tall, and it was as if he was stepping on the yellow springs of the underworld. His entire body was entwined with chaotic chi and blood, and the 9 divine laws were added to his body. A giant foot, as if Mount Buzhou was collapsing, stomped down toward the city. Facing the giant foot that seemed to be able to penetrate the continent, everyone was terrified and screamed. They even peed on the spot. But it was too late to run away. Go! We cultivators should fight to protect the ruins of deity and the people. What joy is there in life and what suffering is there in death? We'll kill the fiends and defend the Tao. The soul formation cultivator and hundreds of nascent soul cultivators guarding the city roared and shot up to the sky. All kinds of Dharma laws swept across the sky and many Dharma artifacts tore the sky apart. Their light shone brightly and dazzlingly. Heroes and entities, you're going to be killed by Kong Taechu to protect us. Why is the world always dominated by demons and the strong? Where is justice and justice? Let's strike Kong Taechu with a thunderbolt. Countless mortals below cried, wailed and roared after seeing the cultivators die for them. They were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Jiang Tian looked indifferent and his eyes were cruel. He stomped on the ground like an ancient deity, as if a planet had fallen. Jiang Tian's foot was so terrifying and invincible at the moment. How could a soul formation cultivator and a few nascent soul cultivators stop him? He stomped, piercing the clouds, splitting the sky, killing people and destroying cities. That soul formation grand cultivator was holding a halberd, which was also a Taoist artifact. However, it was shattered by the energy wind when it was a few hundred meters away from Jiang Tian's giant foot. Then, even if he roared, burned his divine power and launched all kinds of peerless attacks, flames flickered around his body and even the Dharma laws were burned, it was useless. With a loud bang, it was crushed into a bloody mist by Jiang Tian's chaotic aura. Jiang Tian's foot was like stepping on an ant. There was no obstruction at all. His speed was stable as he continued to step on the ground. Bang bang bang. Under the suppression of the law of chaos, hundreds of nascent soul heavenly lords couldn't resist at all. They exploded one after another. Clouds of colorful blood chi exploded in the air like fireworks. None of them managed to escape and were crushed by Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian's face was cold, and his eyes were cold. He was neither happy nor sad. He was completely calm as he continued to stomp down. In this city, various formations and restrictions were like layers of blooming lotus flowers that propped up a barrier, dazzling and resplendent. Various images of strange beasts roared towards the sky, domineering and mighty, shocking the heavens and the earth. Every single one of them was a formation spirit. Those were all divine-level restrictions and formations, which could withstand a full-force attack from a soul formation realm warrior. There were dozens of them. And yet, they were all useless under Jiang Tian's foot. Amidst a series of strange cracking sounds, the layers of protective shields were torn apart like paper. This city was instantly trampled flat by Jiang Tian and disappeared from the ground, leaving behind a huge footprint that was dozens of miles wide and more than a few miles deep. Inside the footprint, blood was like a vast lake, broken bones and flesh were like mud, and all kinds of buildings and fortresses were shattered into pieces. Jiang Tian glanced at it and continued to charge forward. The Zhongyuan province, where the ruined city was located, was already in sight. When Jiang Tian arrived at the magnificent, burning prairie city, in the east of the Zhongyuan province, billions of people in the entire ruins of deity were speechless. They were all frightened and even a bit desperate. At the moment, Jiang Tian had already conquered 7 provinces, penetrated 5 large lines of defense and destroyed countless small lines of defense and cities. He had killed more than 50 soul formation realm cultivators and countless nascent soul realm cultivators. Burning Prairie City was the east gate of the Zhongyuan province. Once he passed through the gate, Jiang Tian would enter the Zhongyuan province, which was only 10,000 miles away from the ruined city. 10,000 miles was certainly a long distance from the point of view of humans on Earth. But for the ruins of deity, which was 1,000,000 miles in size, it was already very close. For a soul formation grand cultivator who could travel 100 miles in a blink, it was a distance of half an hour. Jiang Tian had already arrived at the city. I was wrong. This Kong Teichu is so powerful. Even Fairy Rui Long, who had been watching the battle closely, was shocked. To be honest, she had never thought that he would be able to withstand the self-explosion of a god and a large war machine from the ancient times. She then suspected that Jiang Tian might really be able to break into the ruined city and change the world. Jiang Tian stopped outside of Burning Prairie City. He changed his appearance and landed in a small town like a mortal traveler. He rested for a while and prepared for the final battle. Even though he had the chaotic divine body, he was still a bit tired after killing dozens of soul formation realm cultivators and crossing half of the continent of the ruins of deity in half a day. Wine flags fluttered in the wind. There was a small tavern with 3 wooden rooms. There were peach blossoms at the corner of the stone path and green grass around it. But there were no customers. There was only an old shopkeeper who seemed to be deaf and blind. He was still guarding the tavern, as if he didn't know the war had broken out. Jiang Tian had just sat down and ordered a pot of peach blossom wine when he heard someone talking to him with their immortal will. "Your Majesty Tai Chu, I want to see you." Didn't you say that you've cut ties with Bai Muxue and have nothing to do with the new heavenly court? Jiang Tian sipped the sweet peach blossom wine and put on a mocking smile. It was Bai Mushue's master, Fairy Rui Long. She was 10 miles away on her sword and talking to Jiang Tian with her immortal will. I'm here because someone asked me to. Ao Qijue of the Heavenly Court's Assassin Dynasty wants to see you. He's already waiting for you in Burning Prairie City. Fairy Rui Long's beautiful face showed a bit of helplessness as she said softly. Who does he think he is? Since he wants to see me, he should come here himself. Does he have the right to ask me to see him? Jiang Tian's eyes turned cold. He didn't have a good impression of Ao Qijue. The smile on Fairy Rui Long's face stiffened, but there was nothing she could do. After all, Jiang Tian rose to power, catching up from behind. Right now, he was someone who could wrestle with the immortal ruins imperial dynasty, dividing the world equally. Although Ao Qijue's bloodline was noble, in terms of strength and influence, he was far inferior to Jiang Tian. She hesitated for a while and said, "Okay, let me report to him." The Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty was very influential. It was said that they were formed by the descendants of the ancient Heavenly Court's royal family. Soon, a luxurious cloud tower flew over. It was extremely luxurious and emitted a dazzling light. Cultivator Tai Chu, I'm Ao Qijue. I've heard a lot about you. I'm finally able to meet you today. Then Ao Qijue, who was wearing a dragon robe and a flat crown, exuding the majesty of an emperor, stepped down from the cloud tower accompanied by a few soul formation stage experts. His face was full of joy, and he laughed heartily as he walked up to Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian raised his eyelids and sneered. Ao Qijue, what do you want to say? A trace of displeasure appeared on Ao Qijue's face when Jiang Tian called him by his name, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye, and he concealed it extremely well. After that, he said with a face full of joy, "Fellow Taoist Grand Primordium, I came to see you because I have something to persuade you." Chapter 1644. You want to send a message for the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality? You want me to stop here and take control of the territory? Will the territory east of the line belong to me? Jiang Tian said. Indeed. Ao Qijue was a bit startled. He hadn't expected all of this to be within Jiang Tian's expectations. Ao Qijue, I've already felt that the ruins of immortality won't stop until I'm dead. There must be something wrong with the sudden peace talks. There must be a trap. Jiang Tian smiled. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality are cunning. Even the master of the academy, who's known as a saint, surrendered 7 days ago on the Xiantian mountain range, but he secretly set up an invisible battleship to kill me. Tai Chu, what's in it for them to kill you? Ao Qijue smiled wryly and shook his head. The crisis of the third planet of the South Gate isn't a lie. Even if they kill you, the ruins of immortality will be devoured by the third planet in 100 years, and all the creatures there will be reduced to ashes. At this time, both the cultivators of the ruins of immortality and the natives of the deity land should put aside their differences and work together to solve the problem of the third planet of the South Gate. He sneered and said, Tai Chu, this is the end of the world. We don't have much time left. I hope you won't be blinded by power and forget the billions of lives of the natives of the deity land for your own interests. He was clearly saying that Jiang Tian wanted to fight this fierce battle to become the emperor. He was blinded by his desire for power and ignored the people of the world for his own interests. In fact, their conversation had been broadcasted to the entire ruins of immortality through a Dharma artifact. The descendants of the wood spirit planet and all the cultivators of the ancient heavenly court were watching this scene. Alas, that's right. At this time, the end of the world is close at hand. Besides, the empire of the ruins of immortality has already surrendered. Why do we have to kill them all? You should know how to forgive. If you want to be a wise emperor, you should be magnanimous and have the bearing to swallow the sun, the moon, and the stars. I think Kong Teichu isn't as smart as Ao Qijue. After all, he's not a descendant of the royal family. His bloodline is a little weaker. Therefore, after hearing Ao Qijue's words, even the native descendants of the immortal land were slightly shaken. They no longer supported Jiang Tian as firmly as before. Some people even scolded and mocked Jiang Tian. In the face of Ao Qijue's words, Jiang Tian smiled indifferently and said with some indifference, "I, Kong Teichu, don't care about a mere throne in the ruins of immortality at all. You are merely frogs at the bottom of a well and don't know my scope at all." Even Fairy Ruelong couldn't help but smile mockingly. If it was not for the throne, then what was it for? No matter what you say, you still want to be the emperor of this world. However, she was still very smart. There was no need to talk about this issue now. She was also afraid of angering Jiang Tian. A smile appeared on his face as he said, "Fellow Taoist Taichu, I also think that the Immortal Ruins Imperial Dynasty is being very sincere this time. Do you really want to fight to the death? Even if you can flatten the Immortal Ruins Empire, could it be that you still want to kill everyone in the world? They will rebel against you. The best result is to unite and live in peace. Fight to the death with me? Does a mere Immortal Ruins Imperial Dynasty have the right to do so?" Jiang Tian's face was full of disdain. He smiled and said, "Ao Qijue, I'm curious. What benefits did the Immortal Ruins Imperial Dynasty give you for speaking up for them?" Ao Qijue's face turned red as he said truthfully, "The Immortal Ruins Imperial Dynasty promised me that if we call a truce, then they will support me as the master of the heavenly court." Of course, he could lie, but this matter would be announced to the world sooner or later. When that time came, if it didn't match the truth, then he would be a laughingstock. However, he immediately changed the topic and put on an impassioned look. He added, "However, fellow Taoist Taichu, I don't care about the throne. I care about the people of the world. As long as you agree to a truce, I will make you the new master of the heavenly court." He stood up and bowed deeply, his words sincere. Jiang Tian laughed and shook his head. "Have you forgotten the blood feud that destroyed the ancient heavenly court 10,000 years ago? Have you forgotten that Ao Huang and many sages died in the hands of the Emperor of the Ruins? Not to mention 10,000 years ago, many descendants of the deity ground died in the pursuit of the 9 guards of the ruins of deity in the past 1,000 years. Not only were the descendants of the deity ground chased to the lower worlds, but there were also arrays that extracted spirit chi and even melted planets for the cultivators of the ruins of deity to enjoy. Have you forgotten all that? Forgiving doesn't mean I've forgotten history." Ao Qijue was unmoved. Fairy Ruelong was a little anxious. She could not keep her cool and said helplessly, "Do you understand, fellow Taoist Taichu? The people who had stayed on ancient Earth back then were all mortals who had no cultivation and poor innate abilities. They didn't even have the right to go to the deity grounds on the other continents. You're not a descendant of the deity ground. The blood feud of the ancient heavenly court has nothing to do with you. As the descendant of Ao Huang, Ao Qijue was able to let go of the past and bear with the humiliation for the sake of the world. Why can't you? Are you really so narrow-minded and murderous? Will you be happy if you cause bloodshed and plunge people into misery and suffering?" She almost said that Jiang Tian was meddling in other people's business. After all, as the descendants of the ancient celestial court's royal family, even the assassins were willing to shake hands and make peace. Jiang Taichu was only a mortal, or even a lowly person. What did revenge have to do with him? Not everyone in the empire of the ruins of deity is bad. Only the old ruins emperor and the master of the academy started the war back then. Prince Xia is in charge now. His mother is also a descendant of the deity ground, just like us. He's kind-hearted and is close to the locals. Kind-hearted? Close? Jiang Tian clicked his tongue and shook his head. Suddenly, his immortal will moved and he looked at the sky. He snickered and said, "The empire of the ruins of deity is indeed more vicious than I thought. This time, not only are they going to kill me, but also you. Even the Prairie Fire City will be buried with them." What? Everyone looked at the sky in fear. They saw, above the 9 heavens, the 6 floating grotto heavens were like giant planets. They were all blooming with colorful light. The light intertwined and evolved into a huge matrix. Through the deep space chi drawing magic matrix, It was absorbing the power of the worlds below the ruins of immortality. That scene was extremely shocking. The vast and dense spirit chi kept surging from the low-level worlds like a river. Many Dharma laws gathered into light threads and countless Dharma laws gathered into light beams. In the end, they formed a giant light pillar that eclipsed the second planet of the South Gate. Everyone was shocked. Is the 6 grotto heavens a super array? They've been waiting for 10,000 years for this attack? Everyone's faces were filled with fear. Even the cultivators of the ruins of deity were stunned and looked at the sky. That was a top secret, just like the military secrets on Earth or the supernuclear weapons. How could it be revealed so easily? At that moment, the world was shaking. The Dharma laws and Tao artifacts of the families let out roars and vibrated. The Dharma laws and the Grand Tao inside broke out of the artifacts and shot to the sky. They were divided into the 5 elements, yin-yang, metal, wood, water, fire and earth, and gathered in the 6 grotto heavens. What joy is there in life? What pain is there in death? With my broken body, I'll help you. There were also old fossils who didn't have much time left. They sat cross-legged in the temple and chanted the Sutra of Rebirth. Some of them were determined, some of them were peaceful, and some of them were devout. They collapsed bit by bit and turned into a rain of light. The fragments of the Grand Tao and the Dharma laws inside also surged toward the grotto heavens. The 6 grotto heavens shone like the sun in the sky, gathering the power of many low-level worlds and the Dharma power of many cultivation's sacred grounds on the surface of the ruins of deity to form a vast floating array. Then, it erupted with terrifying radiance, dazzling to the extreme as it shot towards where Jiang Tian was. This was a type of exceptional attack. It came from beyond the heavens, penetrating 1,000,000 li, drawing in the natural laws and essence energy of the 9 heavens 10 earths. It surged through the skies, cutting through heaven and earth, splitting apart the primal chaos. Everything between heaven and earth dimmed, only leaving behind a resplendent pillar of light. This pillar of light was extremely powerful. Everywhere it passed, the void within a radius of 5 kilometers was torn apart and annihilated into pitch-black chaotic holes. All kinds of great Taos intertwined and slaughtered. It was incomparably sharp and condensed, and it could even kill a void return powerhouse. This is the deity-slaying platform of the ancient heavenly courts. They've revived it. At this moment, Ao Chijue was so scared that his legs gave out. The 6 grotto heavens had always existed in this world and had existed since the era of the deity ground. It was said that the original 6 grotto heavens weren't grotto heavens, but Dharma artifacts of the satellite level. The heavenly works divine general of the ancient heavenly courts had spent thousands of years building them to deal with the invaders from other planets. However, during the War of the Era of Tao damage, these super Dharma artifacts had used up their Dharma power and their Dharma patterns were destroyed, so they couldn't attack anymore. But the spirit chi was still there, so the invaders of the ruins of deity used them as grotto heavens. Its power, in a word, was enough to kill void return saints. Nobody had thought that the deity-slaying platform and the current 6 grotto heavens would be revived by the cultivators of the ruins of deity as Dharma artifacts and Dharma arrays to kill Jiang Tian. There was also him and Fairy Ruelong, who had come to mediate for the ruins of deity. Chapter 1645. Prince Xia, you're so cruel. You're even going to kill us. An assassin from the heavenly courts roared. He finally understood that the empire of the ruins of immortality didn't expect them to persuade Jiang Tian, nor did they care if they could. They were just using the same trick to numb Jiang Tian. We were too naive. Ruelong Fairy was immediately pressed to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body cracked like broken porcelain. She couldn't help but smile bitterly, feeling ashamed and regretful. She had always thought that Jiang Tian had lost his mind for power, and she also thought that Jiang Tian was too cruel, which was why he killed the empire of the ruins of immortality. But then she realized that Jiang Tian's judgment was correct. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality were tigers and wolves. Cooperating with them was like asking a tiger for its skin. Facing such enemies, Only by abandoning all illusions and recognizing the cruel reality like Jiang Tian could they win. The 6 grotto heavens were 6 small worlds. The spirit chi in each small world could give birth to dozens of soul formation cultivators. At the moment, the spirit chi, Dharma laws and grand Tao of the 6 grotto heavens were all activated to attack Jiang Tian. How powerful would that be? The vast light of Dharma laws was earth-shattering. Each grotto heaven represented a Dharma law: wind, fire, water, earth, electricity, darkness. In the end, the light beams merged into one and turned into a beam of light that held up the sky. Besides, the Dharma laws of many Dharma artifacts in the vast ruins of immortality were swallowed, and some dying living fossils chose to sacrifice themselves to strengthen the light beam. The light beam fell from the sky and enveloped them. It was thick and strong, completely enveloping this area and killing the Dharma laws. It was too powerful. Even though several soul formation cultivators activated their protective Dharma artifacts and shone brightly, they couldn't withstand it and collapsed like paper. Then, their bodies were affected. The deity-slaying desk was too powerful. In ancient times, before the deity ground was opened, it was said to be able to kill void-returned saints. Even though it was exaggerated, it was enough to show how terrifying the deity-slaying desk was. They were merely semi-god realm cultivators. How could they resist it? In a short period of time, their divine treasures almost collapsed, and their gods were suppressed in an instant. They couldn't even unleash the slightest bit of the laws contained within. It was difficult for them to even move a step, as though they were nailed there. Only Ao Chijue was left. He had a dragon nest jade pendant that was passed down from the Ao sovereign and could be considered a saint weapon. He was barely able to resist the attack, but he was still in great pain. His skin split open and streams of blood seeped out. His collapse seemed to be imminent. All of a sudden, he saw strands of primal chaos aura fall from the Mother Stone Cauldron above Jiang Tian's head. They protected Jiang Tian, and he wasn't hurt at all. Fellow Taoist Grand Primordium, help me, though Chijue had a pitiful expression on his face. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on his back. He walked towards Jiang Tian with great difficulty, wanting to obtain the protection of the Mother Stone Cauldron. Rui Long Fairy also screamed and crawled towards Jiang Tian like an injured dog. She begged, "Fellow Taoist Grand Primordium, please save me for the sake that the Jade Lady sect once provided information for the bandits. Prince Xia, he is a kind man. Go ask him for help. I'm narrow-minded and I treat human lives like grass. I'm cold and heartless. Why would I care about you?" Jiang Tian sneered. He didn't even bother to look at them again. He spoke with his immortal will and walked towards the outside of the light pillars with the Mother Stone Cauldron above his head. Jiang Tian had already felt the killing intent of the semi-god realm cultivators that Ao Chijue brought. Jiang Tian wasn't a saint. Those people were already on his opposite side. There was no need to save them. Jiang Tian didn't care about their lives at all. "I don't want to. Dynasty of the Ruins of Immortality, you're so vicious." Behind Jiang Tian, miserable, desperate and resentful screams were earth-shattering. They sounded like wounded beasts roaring in desperation. Their skin cracked and cracks spread all over their bodies. The next moment, many semi-god realm cultivators, including Rui Long Fairy, collapsed. Their Dharma laws turned into powder, their flesh and blood turned into light rain, and their bones scattered in the air like broken jade. In the end, even Ao Chijue's dragon nest jade pendant exploded. Ao Chijue also died. His body and soul were gone. At that moment, billions of cultivators in the entire ruins of immortality and the low-level worlds were stunned. Nobody had thought that this would be the outcome. It turned out that the ruins of immortality had pretended to be peaceful just to calm Jiang Tian down and make it easier to activate the deity's slaying array. At that moment, the cultivators and mortals from the deity land who had just mocked Jiang Tian wanted to slap themselves in the face. They were so ashamed that they couldn't show their faces. They were too stupid and naive. The ruthlessness and viciousness of the imperial court of the ruins of immortality was not something that had happened overnight. They had enslaved them like ants for tens of thousands of years. They had even exterminated races and destroyed their planets. And yet, They still had fantasies about the ruins of immortality at that moment. Compared to Jiang Tian, whose heart was as hard as iron and as steady as a rock, they were like 3-year-old children. Has the Taichu Heavenly Emperor died? Looking at the light beam that seemed to hold up the sky, many local cultivators in the deity land were desperate. Their faces turned pale and tears ran down their cheeks. Jiang Tian was like a ray of light that tore open the darkness and illuminated the dark world, allowing them to see the bloody history and the cruel reality of being enslaved and oppressed. They even killed their way out. But then, if Ao Qijue hadn't interfered with His Majesty, he might have noticed it in time and avoided the attack of the deity's slaying array. Many mortal cultivators were burning with anger and hatred, cursing loudly. At that moment, the entire ruins of immortality was cheering. The cultivators of the wood spirit planet were completely excited. Countless cultivators of the ruins of immortality smiled excitedly and many of them cried. Kong Taichu is finally dead. His voice echoed in the continent of the ruins of immortality. Be it cultivators, mortals, officials, nobles, or commoners, they were all ecstatic at this moment, as if they had gone mad. Kong Taichu, you've caused a lot of bloodshed and killed many people. Now, you've finally received your retribution. Master, you saw it. Kong Taichu is finally dead. God has eyes. God has eyes. This was especially true for the cultivators from the sects and grotto heavens that held grudges against Jiang Tian. Those whose fathers, brothers, and relatives had died at Jiang Tian's hands were even more emotional. Many of them had tears in their eyes as they raised their arms and cheered loudly. Some of them even hit their heads on the ground and wailed. Jiang Tian gave them too much pressure. He was like a demon and a god, as if he could destroy the world. After all, Jiang Tian was known for his narrow-mindedness, vindictiveness, cruelty, and viciousness. He could easily wipe out families and armies. If Jiang Tian overturned the empire of the ruins of immortality, he would definitely take revenge. As the mainstay of the empire of the ruins of immortality, they wouldn't have a good ending. In fact, the activation of the deity's slaying platform this time consumed a lot of spirit chi. The spirit chi of the 6 grotto heavens was used up and the array patterns on the ground disappeared. There were even terrifying cracks on the ground and it was about to collapse. They had to leave their homes and find a new place to live. However, as long as they saw Jiang Tian die an unnatural death, they were also willing. Even the legendary void-returning saints would die in such an ancient array, let alone Kong Taichu. No matter how strong Kong Taichu is, he's only a nascent soul cultivator. He can only exert the power of a soul formation cultivator. How can he withstand an array that can kill a Tao reunion perfected immortal? That's right. After all, Kong Taichu is a cultivator from the desolate, abandoned galaxy. How can he withstand the Dharma artifacts of the ruins of immortality? In the ruins Emperor's Palace, the people who had been worried finally relaxed and were pleasantly surprised. Master, we've won. Prince Xiahe, who was in charge of commanding the entire battle, trembled all over. Tears streamed down his beautiful face as he looked at Sky River Star Lord. Sky River Star Lord, who had been solemn and tense, also smiled. He glanced at everyone and said, "The plan to repair the deity-slaying platform array of the ancient heavenly court has been going on for hundreds of years. I didn't expect to succeed today." Jade Lotus Fairy of the Academy's refining faculty, the Grand Priests of Sky Palace, and the Divine Craftsmen of the Ruins Emperor's Palace Department of Works all contributed to this. Prince Xiahe nodded in agreement. Kong Taichu didn't lose to anyone, but to a powerful civilization. No matter how strong he is alone. As for our Ruins of Immortality Empire, we have skilled craftsmen, array masters, talisman masters, refiners, and grand priests who observe the trajectory of the stars. We have billions of cultivators and a powerful civilization. This is the power of a civilization. Yes, civilization. As long as civilization doesn't die, the fire will never be extinguished. When everyone heard this, they were all enlightened and agreed with him. Prince Xiahe suddenly thought of something. His eyes turned red and his gaze was deep. He choked and said, "And those seniors who sacrificed themselves in advance to stop Kong Techu's invasion. We will never forget them." In an instant, a solemn mood spread and surged in the ruins' emperor's palace. Many cultivators, despite their long lifespans and having experienced too much slaughter and cruelty, could not help but feel grief in their hearts at that moment. They could not calm down. In fact, the first few lines of defense were just to exhaust Jiang Tian. The upper echelons of the dynasty did not count on the dozens of soul formation cultivators at all. They understood that those large Dao artifacts could not kill Jiang Tian. Even the self-destruction of a god would not work. The deity-slaying platform's ancient array was the true trump card. Chapter 1646. Fairy Jade Lotus said with lingering fear, "Actually, the immortal slaying platform was only successfully repaired 5 days ago. However, it was not tested. Firstly, we were worried about alerting Kong Techu and alerting him in advance. Secondly, activating the immortal slaying platform once consumes a massive amount of heaven and earth spirit chi. According to our calculations, the remaining spirit chi in the 6 grotto heavens is only enough to activate it 2 or 3 times. To think that the heavens would bless us and allow us to successfully kill Kong Techu in a single activation." Everyone revealed joyous smiles, certain that Jiang Tian was dead for sure this time. The spirit chi in the 6 grotto heavens was vast and surging, but in total, it was only enough to activate the immortal slaying formation 2 or 3 times. It was clear how terrifying the immortal slaying formation was. It could probably even kill a void reversion saint. At that moment, Yan Hua could no longer control his emotions as he knelt on the ground with a thud. His face was filled with tears as he raised his arms and shouted, "Teacher, senior brothers Black and White and Ban Shan, did you see that? We've avenged you. Your spirit's in heaven." However, halfway through his sentence, he couldn't close his mouth. Instead, his mouth opened even wider. His eyes were filled with astonishment as he stared at the giant light screen. The corners of his eyes almost split open. His eyeballs were trembling, and his face was filled with disbelief. Everyone followed his gaze and turned to look. They saw it. In the light screen, a figure slowly walked out from the gradually dimming light pillar that was about to be extinguished. It was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in a courtyard. That person was dressed in black and had black hair and eyes. His face was as handsome as a true god's, and there was a craggy stone tripod above his head. Thousands of threads of primordial chaos drooped down and protected him firmly. It was Jiang Tian. As they zoomed in, they could clearly see that Jiang Tian was completely unscathed, let alone bloodstains and wounds on his body. Kong Techu. At that moment, countless upper echelons of the dynasties in the ruins emperor's palace looked at that figure in horror. They were filled with fear as though they had fallen into a nightmare. That was an ancient dermic formation that was said to be able to slay immortals and saints. No matter how strong Kong Techu was, he should not have been able to withstand it. He should have been reduced to ashes, and even his divine soul should have been destroyed. He should have completely disappeared from this world. How could he come out unscathed? Could he be a return to void stage saint? At this moment, everyone was stunned. They were dumbfounded and could not say a word. Only Prince Xiahe exclaimed in a trembling voice, "A return to void stage saint." These words caused the hearts of everyone to go cold, and their hearts fell straight into the 9 depths of hell. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over their heads, causing them to feel cold from head to toe, and even the cracks in their bones felt cold. Everyone's smiles froze on their faces. They could no longer smile. Everyone was motionless, as if they were clay sculptures. It's the power of that cauldron. Heavenly River Star Sovereign's eyes were sharp as he stared at the cauldron above Jiang Tian's head, as if he wanted to see through something. This cauldron? Where did it come from? Prince Xiahe frowned. This cauldron had shown its power on the Xintian mountain range. It had been able to withstand the attacks of hundreds of Dao artifacts and protect the great Ko dynasty. However, Prince Xiahe had not expected the origin stone cauldron to be so powerful. This was an immortal slaying platform that could kill a return to void stage saint. It was far more powerful than an ordinary sacred weapon. Could it be that this origin stone cauldron was even more powerful than a sacred weapon? At this moment, the senior members of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality felt like collapsing. Wasn't Planet East and Ancient Earth a mortal world abandoned by the ancient heavenly court? Later on, it entered the age of decline, and the spiritual energy was thin, so it was impossible to cultivate. How could there be such a heavenly treasure? It was a divine material. If I'm not mistaken, this is the origin stone cauldron, also known as the chaotic source stone cauldron. It belonged to Emperor Zhongli of the ancient heavenly court. Heavenly River Star Sovereign's eyes were fixed on the cauldron and his face was extremely solemn. There was a trace of trembling in his eyes, as well as sadness and despair. This treasure was famous in the era of the ancient heavenly court. It was a legendary divine material. However, he could not figure it out no matter how hard he tried. This treasure had fallen into the hands of Kong Techu. Could it be that the heavens were destroying the wood spirit planet? When they heard the name of the origin stone cauldron, everyone felt a sense of panic. At this moment, it involved the rise and fall of a civilization. They had already put their personal lives aside and vowed to kill Jiang Tian. However, they were worried that if they could not kill Jiang Tian would return to the solar system and destroy the expedition army of the Ruins of Immortality. He's about to attack the Ruins capital. Everyone was shocked. I wonder if the Ruins capital's array can stop him. At this moment, everyone's expression became ugly. Don't panic. The Empire of the Ruins of Immortality has existed for 10,000 years. It's not something that Kong Techu can shake. At this moment, the Heavenly River Lord seemed to be 100 times more confident. He encouraged everyone, flicked his sleeves, and said proudly, "He can't break the Ruins capital's array. Master, I'll control the array and intercept Kong Techu." A trace of seriousness appeared on Jade Lotus Fairy's face as she cupped her fists. "I hope you won't fail your mission. The past divine emperors will help you." The Heavenly River Lord's face was very solemn, with a hint of desolation and sadness. Although Jade Lotus Fairy was the personal disciple of the headmaster, the Heavenly River Lord had a wide circle of friends among the three giants. He often went in and out of the academy to guide Jade Lotus Fairy and the others. Arrays were originally based on the stars and the earth veins. It could be said that arrays were connected to the art of observing the heavens and earth. In other words, they had to be based on this. As the number one array master of the Ruins of Immortality, Jade Lotus Fairy was extremely respectful to the Heavenly River Lord. Although they were not master and disciple in name, they were master and disciple in reality. He knew that this parting with Fairy Jade Lotus was likely to be eternal. How could he not be sad? Have all the past divine emperors come out? Everyone was shocked. How powerful were the past divine emperors? They were all soul formation cultivators and had the aura of an emperor. They had once ruled the world and controlled thousands of people. Every one of them was amazing. Their brilliance shone on an era, and their supreme majesty shocked the world. Now, all of them had come out to fight against Jiang Tian. "I will go with the heart of death." Jade Lotus Fairy didn't say much. Her clear and beautiful eyes were exceptionally calm, without a trace of emotion. Her delicate face was still so gentle and beautiful. With that, she turned and flew into the sky, turning into a shocking rainbow and flying away, leading many array masters to their respective positions. Looking at Jade Lotus Fairy's back, everyone's faces were filled with grief, as if a fox mourned the death of a rabbit. Jade Lotus Fairy came from a famous family. Her ancestor was the creator of the array of the Ruins of Immortality. Back then, she was as famous as the headmaster and the Heavenly River Lord. However, she was humble and low-key. She didn't care about power or wealth. She was pure and quiet, and had spent her life studying and maintaining arrays. Not only was she extremely beautiful, but she was also full of immortal chi. She was otherworldly, like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. However, everyone could imagine that even if she could kill Kong Techu, she would probably be seriously injured or even die. They didn't feel good about it. After all, Jiang Tian's mother stone cauldron had amazing defensive power. It could even withstand the immortal slaying array platform. The possibility of the array of the ruins of immortality killing Jiang Tian was very small. Xian Hu, who was also the Academy's chancellor, was already crying. Yan Hua gritted her teeth and murmured dejectedly, "Kang Teichu, demon, why don't you die?" At this moment, Jiang Tian was like a peerless heavenly knife, cutting through space and tearing apart lines of defense. He had already flown 100 miles south of the ruins of immortality. Along the way, Jiang Tian also encountered many obstacles. The Zhongyuan province was the last line of defense of the ruins of immortality. Half of the cultivators in the ruins of immortality were gathered here. It was densely packed and lines of defense crisscrossed. Seeing Jiang Tian fly over, the cultivators of the ruins of immortality seemed to have gone crazy. Groups of tens of thousands of people, sects, and families all gathered an army and charged towards Jiang Tian. They were like moths to a flame, charging forward without any care for their own safety. Normally, when Jiang Tian opened the Mother Stone Cauldron, the aura of primordial chaos would descend. Their attacks couldn't hurt Jiang Tian at all, and Jiang Tian was too lazy to fight back. But sometimes, when Jiang Tian was annoyed, Jiang Tian would also fight back. Often, with a stomp of his foot, flesh and blood would splatter everywhere, shaking heaven and earth, and thousands of people would die. With a swipe of his finger, blood would flow and a sect or family would be destroyed. Up until now, the 8 guardian families had all been destroyed or scattered by Jiang Tian. For the ruins of immortality, this was undoubtedly an earth-shattering calamity. It could be said to be world-destroying and unprecedented. Blood dyed the earth and mountains red. Corpses and bones were everywhere, piled up into mountains and blocking the rivers. The bitter smell of blood was very thick. Blood chi interwove in the air like clouds, and smoke of war soared into the sky. Loud cries, shrill screams, and helpless wails could be heard everywhere. The remains of all kinds of formations, chariots, flying boats, and treasure ships were scattered messily. Under the illumination of the setting sun, they carried a dim and desolate aura of vicissitudes. On the path that Jiang Tian passed, the earth cracked and mountains collapsed. It was a mess and ruin. It was chaotic to the extreme, giving people a strong sense of doomsday. Jiang Tian looked down and suddenly saw a green and lovely land at the foot of the Dragon Vein Mountain. It rose and fell gently like waves. On the green meadow, there were many black and white buildings, giving people a simple and elegant feeling. Pink peach blossoms and apricot flowers decorated it, tainted by the mortal world, but also like a peerless paradise. 100 Moon Academy. Jiang Tian grinned. Chapter 1647. There was a giant statue on the square of the academy. It was the headmaster of the academy holding the sky-crushing ruler. The headmaster of the academy looked kind, honest, and elegant, like a saint. On the side, there were also statues of the past godly emperors. There was the mighty and domineering godly emperor Ba Dao, the compassionate godly emperor Jing Nong, as well as godly emperor Wu Ji, who was famous for his political and martial prowess. Every single one of them was famous throughout the ages. They had opened up new territories, made great contributions, and ruled over thousands of people and stars. 3,000 disciples gathered on the square. They were all wearing the robes of the academy. They looked calm and sad, holding flowers in their hands and offering them to the statue of the headmaster of the academy. The other places were either scorched by the flames of war, covered with blood and people crying and running away, or dead and empty. People were hiding in the heavily guarded cities and sects, or in the mountains and forests that Jiang Tian wouldn't pass by. Only the academy was full of vitality, but it was also calm. Jiang Tian walked in the air, one step at a time, and finally stopped in the air above the square. He looked at them coldly and said in a cold voice, "You have forgotten your ancestors, and recognized a thief as your father, stubborn. I'll send you on your way." Jiang Tian could tell that most of the disciples of the academy were from the 2nd or 3rd level worlds. They were the descendants of the ancient deity's natives, which was different from the descendants of the wood spirit planet. Their ancestors could be the Ao Emperor and other sages of the ancient heavenly courts, or divine generals, or soldiers who fought against the wood spirit planet. However, after a long time of enslavement, they had forgotten their history. They only had the ruins of deities and the headmaster of the academy in their hearts. They no longer cared about the deity ground and the ancient heavenly courts, so they called themselves the new people of the ruins of deities. Kong Teichu, we're not forgetting our ancestors. We know the truth of history. He was a disciple of the academy, who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. He was tall, handsome, and had delicate features. He was wearing a black academy uniform. He stepped on the sky with a bit of stubbornness in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of Jiang Tian at all, as if he wanted to have a discussion with Jiang Tian. In the age of Tao damage, the descendants of the wood spirit planet lived in space cities or battleships. They would run out of energy sooner or later. It's the instinct of life to continue civilization and find a place to live. Why did the ancient heavenly court refuse to let them land? Isn't this cutting off their path of survival? A young girl also ascended into the sky. She was wearing a pink uniform and had a pink face, rosy cheeks, fluffy hair, and a pair of big watery eyes that were lively and cute. She faced Jiang Tian and questioned, "If you want to talk about history, then I'll talk about it with you in detail." Strictly speaking, the second planet of the South Gate did not belong to the deity ground. The wanderers of the ancient immortal land had sailed to this galaxy and claimed it as their own. Wasn't this an invasion? Kong Teichu, answer me. Another disciple, who had horns on his head and thick hair, was tall and burly. His aura surged, and he seemed to be a member of the demon clan. He rose into the air and shouted. Moreover, after the descendants of the wood spirit planet occupied the ruins of immortality, they didn't exterminate the entire race. The natives of the deity ground could still live in the level 2 and level 3 worlds. They even had the chance to enter the ruins of immortality through the Academy's selection and become new immigrants. Isn't that very benevolent? Kong Teichu, why must you destroy the peaceful and harmonious situation? A disciple of the Academy questioned. Isn't it for your own interests? Isn't it just to become the emperor? Your behavior makes us despise you. Shouldn't the wood spirit planet and the deity ground put aside their differences and work together to solve the crisis of the world destruction? How many people have you killed? Don't you know how to repent? Those disciples of the academy were very hot-blooded and were not afraid of death at all. They questioned Jiang Tian with mockery, disdain, anger, and hatred. In a moment, the crowd was full of mockery. Jiang Tian lowered his head and slightly closed his eyes, as if he had nothing to say. Suddenly, Jiang Tian opened his eyes and said with a mocking smile, "You've been servants for too long. You've even thought about your masters. You're hopeless. But I've never regarded you as the descendants of the deity ground since the beginning. It's because your hearts have already changed. You can never wake up a person who's pretending to be asleep. You're like mothers. As long as you get benefits from the ruins of deity, that's enough. You've already selectively forgotten the existence of the universe chi-drawing array and how the empire of deity exploited, bullied, and enslaved the natives of the deity ground for 10,000 years. I know you're not convinced, but I'm not trying to convince you. If you're not convinced, I'll just kill you." The next moment, Jiang Tian laughed and the cauldron of creation flew out. It quickly expanded and smashed down from the sky. Such power was extremely terrifying. The cauldron of creation was so powerful that it could kill a nascent soul cultivator. If it was swung, not even 10 soul formation cultivators would be able to resist it. In an instant, blood spurted and broken bones flew. There were earth-shattering screams. None of those disciples of the academy managed to escape. They all died and even their divine souls were destroyed. The academy had set up many arrays, which could be called divine arrays. However, they didn't need to be used at all when facing the terrifying power of the Emperor of the Ruins Palace. Layers of multicolored and dazzling light barriers were propped up. Various phenomena erupted within them. Strange beasts roared, ferocious birds flapped their wings and soared into the sky. There were also ancient gods flying up. There was even the aura of the dragon vein that transformed into a true dragon that coiled around. It was peerlessly mighty and shook the heavens and the earth. The cauldron of creation was too terrifying. It was like a star had fallen and the world had collapsed, destroying everything. After the divine arrays were destroyed, the buildings of the academy also collapsed and turned into ashes. In the end, the hillside disappeared and a giant pit that was a few thousand feet deep appeared. There was a rain of blood and remnant souls wailing inside, as if it was the eye of a devil that connected to hell. The Baiyue Academy, which had been famous in the ruins of deity for thousands of years, was destroyed that day. Jiang Tian didn't change his expression after destroying the academy. He continued flying toward the ruins' capital. Seeing that the disciples of the academy had been killed, the senior members of the Emperor of the Ruins Palace also looked calm and didn't feel sad at all. Only Star Lord Tianhe looked a little regretful. This time, they had been persuaded to stay in the academy as cannon fodder to disturb Jiang Tian's spirit and fighting spirit. Star Lord Tianhe and the others naturally didn't care if they died. Those who weren't of the same race were bound to have different intentions. The royal family of the ruins of deity had always used and controlled the disciples of the academy. In the face of such a calamity, the royal family, the grand cultivators and all the descendants of the wood spirit planet would risk their lives, let alone them. Star Lord Tianhe regretted that Jiang Tian's heart was as hard as steel and wasn't affected at all. Let's see if Kong Teichu will die under the array of the ruins capital. At that moment, countless people looked up at Jiang Tian who was rushing toward the ruins capital. The same thought appeared in their minds at the same time. The ruins capital. The imperial city. It was rumored that the ruins capital wasn't only the capital of the current empire of the ruins of deity, but also the location of the ancient heavenly court of the previous dynasty. The city walls were more than 1,000 feet tall and were covered with all kinds of runes and talismans. There were a lot of sword marks on them, which were apparently filled with an ancient aura. There were even giant claw marks left by some giant monsters in the ancient times, like a vivid history book that described the past. There were many giant mountains in all directions like dragon corpses. There were 9 of them in total, like 9 dragons surrounding a pearl, protecting the imperial city. These 9 dragon veins were way too huge. They stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles and were easily over 10,000 feet tall. There were layers upon layers of mountains, and they were extremely steep. Also, spirit chi came out of many places like clouds and mist, forming many blessed lands that nourished countless sects, families, and forces. There were also arrays in the universe that attracted spirit chi from the mortal world and gathered at some of the main cultivation halls. Auspicious lights filled the air, making it even more magical. According to the old legends, those dragon veins were originally giant true dragons of the universe. They landed on the deity ground a long time ago and did evil. The grand cultivators of the ancient deity ground killed them and turned them into giant mountains. Later on, the ancient heavenly court built an extremely glorious cultivation dynasty with the spirit chi of the dragon veins. Even the empire of the ruins of deity was blessed by it. Inside the ruins capital, there were many streets and buildings with exquisite lines. All kinds of mysterious runes were intertwined on them, which was full of beauty, but there were also waves of Dharma power being emitted. All kinds of aircrafts flew across the sky, some for military use and some for civilian use. They were as fast as lightning. It didn't seem like a world of cultivation, but more like a world of science fiction. There were more than 100 million people living there. Mortals and cultivators lived together, which was far more than any large city on Earth. Orders that involved hundreds of millions of living beings were issued from the Emperor of the Ruins Palace and instantly spread across the entire vast continent. There were also huge amounts of goods and cultivation materials coming in and out of that place. The most advanced cultivation arts were also created and evolved there. On the city wall, many cultivators and soldiers stood straight. They were all wearing armor and holding spears and machetes. They were at least chi refinement cultivators, and some of them were at the foundation establishment level. If they were on Earth, where spirit chi had recovered, They would be transcendent state grandmasters and immortal state grandmasters who could dominate a country and dominate the world. There were at least a few 100,000 cultivators like them. Foundation establishment cultivators, and those above them were flying on swords or dharma artifacts. They were all staring outside the city, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The number of golden core and nascent soul cultivators was simply innumerable. They were like a school of carps crossing the river, densely packed and blotting out the sky. Their faces were solemn and their eyes were resolute. Although they were a little scared, they wouldn't take a step back. Above all the cultivators, there was a young woman standing proudly on a sword, suppressing the sky. She was wearing the standard robe of the Academy's Grand Chancellor, and her sleeves were fluttering in the strong wind like flags. Her originally gentle and beautiful face was now filled with unswerving determination, and her gaze was awe-inspiring and sharp like a sword. Suddenly, her pupils shrank and the entire ruined capital fell silent. A tall figure appeared in the sky above the southern gate of the ruins' capital. He was wearing black clothes, had black hair, and black eyes. He had his hands behind his back and a stone cauldron above his head. It was Jiang Tian. Kong Teichu had arrived. He was fighting against a cultivation dynasty alone. The ultimate battle was about to begin. Chapter 1648. That's terrifying. When Jiang Tian showed up, everyone had the same thought. They were all terrified and trembling. He alone had torn apart many lines of defense, resisted the attacks of large Taoist artifacts, blocked the attacks of the ancient deity-slaying platforms, destroyed the guardian families, attacked thousands of sects and killed dozens of soul formation cultivators in a row. Such a record could be said to be unprecedented. He looked down on the divine emperors and the sect masters of the noble grotto heavens. Such a record had never appeared in the history of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality or even the ancient heavenly court of the previous dynasty. This is the result of a civilization exploding under pressure. Jiang Tian also glanced at the cultivators in the ruins capital and looked a bit emotional. In fact, according to Jiang Tian's experience, the spirit qi in the ruins of immortality was already the limit for 10 soul formation cultivators to be born in the ruins of immortality within 10,000 years. Normally, there would only be 3 soul formation cultivators of the same generation. The other soul formation cultivators would die and turn into the great Tao of heaven and earth. However, there were 100 soul formation cultivators of the same generation in the ruins of immortality. In addition to the soul formation cultivators who had died in the past 10,000 years, there were hundreds or even thousands of them. This was the result of a civilization's potential being stimulated to the extreme under the effect of the survival instinct under the crisis of the apocalypse. It almost wanted to climb to a higher level of civilization and break all kinds of shackles. Let's fight. Jade Lotus Fairy stared at Jiang Tian with a complicated look in her eyes. There was anger, hatred, coldness, confusion, and even a bit of amazement that she didn't want to admit. Kong Teichu, you deserve to die. Suddenly, she opened her mouth. Her fine black hair fluttered like a waterfall as she let out a howl towards the sky. The howl was as sharp as a phoenix's cry and as sonorous as a dragon's roar, rushing towards Jiang Tian like rolling thunder. In an instant, the mountains within 10,000 miles were trembling, rocks were flying in the air, rivers were shaking, and raging waves rolled up thousands of piles of snow. Even though the cultivators next to him were wearing protective gear to block sound wave attacks, they still felt very uncomfortable. They felt dizzy and disgusted. But this was just the aftermath. Fairy Jade Lotus's howl grew louder and louder, carrying boundless hatred and murderous intent. There were laws intertwined in it, visible to the naked eye. It turned into a torrent of sound waves, like a white river, pushing towards Jiang Tian. Wherever it passed, the void collapsed, the earth was crushed, and huge cracks and ravines appeared. If it wasn't for the fact that the ruins were reinforced by many formation runes, it would have collapsed as well. Under the excited gazes of the crowd, the sound wave law directly attacked Jiang Tian. Noisy! Jiang Tian flicked his sleeves, and with a boom, the sound wave river instantly collapsed, unable to withstand a single blow. Jade Lotus Fairy was even shaken to the point of retreating several steps, her face slightly pale. "If you want to fight, then fight. What are you shouting for?" Jiang Tian's face was full of disdain and mockery. Everyone was sweating profusely and their hearts were trembling violently. Kong Teichu was truly domineering. A war that would determine the rise and fall of a civilization was called a fight by him. Jade Lotus Fairy's sound wave attack, which was enough to kill a soul formation cultivator, was just shouting in his eyes. "Fairy Jade Lotus, what you're best at is arrays. Then use your formation to fight me. I want to see just how powerful your ruined capital's formations are." Jiang Tian stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. His words were full of confidence. The initial energy of chaos fell like a waterfall, enveloping him, making him look extremely mysterious. Everyone couldn't believe it. This guy was indeed extremely arrogant. He wanted to fight force with force and challenge the arrays of the ruined city. However, Jiang Tian's attitude made them even more uneasy. Was his stone cauldron really so powerful that even the arrays of the ruined city could withstand it? The deity-slaying platform was indeed powerful, but it was a relic of the previous dynasty after all. Its dharma power was almost used up and it was already at the end of its tether. It wasn't like the arrays of the ruined city, which were built by the new dynasty and were nourished and maintained every day. The divine arrays of the ruined city were 100 times more powerful than the arrays of the deity-slaying platform. "Kong Teichu, I'll grant you your wish." Fairy Jade Lotus snorted coldly. Her pretty face was solemn and her beautiful eyes revealed a deep murderous intent. Her fingers moved again and again. Her hands were like jade and her fingers were as white as scallions. Her movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. After she finished making hand seals, she formed a hand seal with her left hand like a Buddha holding flowers and pointed to the right with her right hand. There was a vast public square where the citizens used to relax and play. There was a huge divine beast standing on top of it. It was 1,000 feet tall and had clouds above its head. It was as tall as the city walls. It was so huge that the mortals standing below it were as tiny as ants. The statue looked like a turtle but not a ghost. It looked like a snake but not a snake. It was more like a turtle with a long neck and tail. Its expression was vivid and lifelike. But at this moment, with a point from Fairy Jade Lotus, the statue released countless bolts of lightning. Countless bolts of lightning as thick as arms and thighs surrounded the statue. As the lightning raged, the statue suddenly cracked and countless pieces of stone fell down. Dunk, dunk, dunk. Muffled sounds were like the beating of a drum. They became louder and louder, shaking people's hearts. It was as if the ground was shaking. People's hearts tightened and they felt oppressed, as if some peerless demon had awakened. In the end, the statue suddenly came to life. It jumped up and shook all the pieces of stone. It rose into the air and became bigger and bigger, heading towards Jiang Tian. It was surrounded by several streams of black Xianming water. Its demonic vertical pupils were extremely deep. It looked down at everyone as if it was suppressing the sky. The moment it appeared, an unparalleled pressure descended, causing the entire ruins to tremble. Countless runes on the streets and buildings lit up to resist this pressure. But its energy was extremely terrifying, as if it could destroy the world. Is this the energy of a divine beast? In an instant, countless soul formation overlords were trembling. Although the awakened divine beast had obviously been tamed and wasn't targeting them, they still felt terrified. It was a natural reverence of the weak towards the strong, like a little white rabbit that would tremble when it encountered a tiger. It was rooted in the depths of their bones and souls, and it was almost an instinct. It was even to the extent that it was 10 times or 100 times more terrifying than the fear Jiang Tian brought to them. This is a real black tortoise. Even the giants in the depths of the ruins' emperor's palace were terrified. Only Star-Lord Heavenly River remained calm. He explained, "This Xianwu divine beast once ravaged our home planet, the Wood Spirit Planet, for tens of thousands of years. It swallowed countless ancestors and even soul formation grand cultivators. Later, it was killed by the Overlord, but its divine soul remained until the ruined city was built. It was refined into an array spirit to protect the city. There are laws intertwining and even fragments of the great Tao floating. It's a soul formation black tortoise? Jiang Tian was also startled. Normal divine beasts at the soul formation stage were only on par with human soul formation cultivators. They were at most on par with the sword god of the ruins Emperor's Palace. However, the black tortoise was the most powerful divine beast in the north, comparable to the Kuan Peng, the thunder python and the red sparrow. After reaching the soul formation stage, its dharma power was earth-shattering and it could even fight against void-returned supreme saints. Jiang Tian had never thought that it would appear there. After all, the ruins of deity and the Milky Way weren't enough to support such a large divine beast. For example, it could swallow all the creatures on a planet with life in one bite. How many planets in the galaxy were enough for it to eat? It was like there were only some hungry insects in the desert, but elephants and lions couldn't grow. The Milky Way was still too barren after all. If there was a mythological beast that could kill return to void stage mighty figures, Jiang Tian would definitely take a detour. After all, it was too risky. Divine beasts weren't as simple as the attacks of the deity-slaying desk. They were full of changes and had all kinds of incredible divine powers. He couldn't just use the energy of the stone cauldron to cover it like before. However, Jiang Tian soon figured it out. It wasn't a real black tortoise, but the divine soul of the black tortoise was still alive. The Dharma laws and Great Tao were still there, and it had been nourished and tamed by an array master to become an array spirit. It wasn't made of flesh and blood, but was condensed by the power of smoke and fire, the energy of crystals, and even the spirit chi of the dragon veins. It was formed by merging with the Dharma laws and Great Tao. Jiang Tian only thought for a moment, and in just a few seconds, the black tortoise formation spirit was already in front of him. It raised its huge foot, which covered the sky and the sun, and slammed down with a palm. Immediately, the sky was torn apart and the space was shattered. A terrifying space storm broke out, and even a soul formation cultivator would die if caught in it. At the same time, a terrifying and cold energy burst out between its fingers and palms, as if it had been blown from hell. Even the space was frozen and cracked. Chapter 1649. What a terrifying attack! At this moment, the Great Ko's group of heroes saw this scene through the light screen. They were all frightened, full of fear, sweating profusely for Jiang Tian. Senior. Long Shengnan and Bai Muxue weren't that tough. They screamed and their faces turned as pale as a sheet of paper. The power of the divine beast was too terrifying. Even if it wasn't that pure, they would be torn apart if they faced it. They wouldn't even be able to move their little fingers. Fight! Jiang Tian soared into the sky. The nascent soul in his body suddenly opened its eyes. The 30-foot-long divine plate appeared behind him again. However, this time, the divine plate was filled with extremely condensed chaotic divine laws. It was as if it was nurturing a sea of stars, a universe, and had the aura of creation. It was extremely dazzling, beautiful, and terrifying. At this moment, the night had already fallen and it looked even more dazzling. Jiang Tian turned into a dazzling ray of light and crashed into it. Bang! The first collision. Jiang Tian was knocked 100 miles away and collapsed a mountain wall, sinking a few miles into the ground. However, the Xianwu didn't move at all. It looked arrogant, as if it were mocking Jiang Tian for being so weak. Wow, not bad. Jiang Tian, who was deep underground, was covered in frost and snow. There was a layer of white ice crystals on his hair and eyebrows. He couldn't help but exclaim. The power of the Xianwu's divine laws and Grand Tao surprised Jiang Tian. Although it was only a soul formation Xianwu and its divine soul was natural. Its body was formed and condensed with spirit chi, energy, mind power and elixirs, but it wasn't much weaker than a normal void return cultivator. Even though Jiang Tian had the stone cauldron on his head, activated his nascent soul and the chaotic divine laws around him, he was still at a disadvantage after the first collision. Great! Kong Teichu, you deserve this. Kong Techu must die. The divine array of the ruins of ruins is invincible. At this moment, all the cultivators of the ruins of deity cheered. Some of them even shed tears of excitement. Jiang Tian's slaughter along the way really made them despair. Other than the time when Jiang Tian wasn't prepared for Zhao Tulong's self-detonation at the floating mountain defense line, he was slightly injured. After that, he had been pushed all the way, and not even the corner of his clothes was torn. This caused the cultivators of the ruins of immortality to collapse. They were not afraid of dying. After all, the apocalyptic crisis was right in front of them. They would die sooner or later. Cultivators had long lifespans. Nascent soul and soul formation cultivators could easily live for thousands of years. Their perception of time was different from ordinary people. To them, the extinction of the ruins of immortality in a few decades was the same as the extinction of ordinary people in a few days. They no longer had any hope of survival in their hearts. However, they were worried that they wouldn't be able to kill Jiang Tian. This was because it concerned the inheritance of a civilization and the future generations. At this moment, they, who had been suppressed and oppressed, finally saw a glimmer of hope. How could they not cheer? Again! Suddenly, rocks flew into the air and the earth shook. Jiang Tian jumped up, pulling out a deep black spatial crack. He shot into the sky from the ground and charged toward the black tortoise again. "Kid, you can't do it." The black tortoise roared with disdain. Its giant claws were covered in scales, and its bone hooks were as dense as heavenly blades. It grabbed at Jiang Tian. There was a trace of greed in its eyes, and it didn't show any mercy. Although its divine soul was strong and its laws existed, without a physical body, it was like water without a source. Usually, it needed spiritual qi, smoke, mind power, and energy to constantly regenerate and support it. However, the best way to maintain its divine soul was the flesh and blood of a powerhouse. It could see at a glance that Jiang Tian's physique was extraordinary and tyrannical. If it used it, it could definitely extend its lifespan and improve its strength. "Kong Techu, you can't hold on for long. Is this a real divine beast?" Jade Lotus Fairy's face was cold, and she curled her lips with a hint of disdain. She stood there calmly and became more and more confident. Bang, bang, bang. Jiang Tian rushed up and fought with the black tortoise, clashing fiercely again and again. The 10-foot divine disk behind him spun quickly and became more dazzling, like the sun in the sky, illuminating half of the city. The chaotic divine body was also pushed to the extreme. It was crystal clear and flashed with a light, as if there were galaxies hidden under its skin. This was an earth-shattering battle. Their energy cracked the clouds, laws shot out and grand daos shook the world. Under the shock waves of the battle between the two, the sky trembled. A few meteors fell from the sky, the mountains collapsed, and the earth cracked open. The area within hundreds of miles of the ruins' capital trembled violently. Many sturdy formation patterns shone brightly, stabilizing the earth and buildings. If it weren't for those array patterns, the city would have collapsed and collapsed under the aftermath of the battle. Jiang Tian was in a tough battle. The black tortoise was an extremely terrifying and powerful being in the universe. An adult black tortoise could be considered a Tao reunion perfected immortal. Even though he was only a baby black tortoise and was only a soul formation cultivator, his divine power was far more powerful than normal human soul formation cultivators. After being nourished by the dragon meridians and the flesh of cultivators, the black tortoise's body was rebuilt by the array masters of the dynasty of the ruins of immortality. It was also supported by the incense and the power of the believers, so it was almost as powerful as a real black tortoise. The Shenming laws and grand daos it had mastered were at least at the sacred grade. It had thousands of changes and was much more powerful than the sword god. Once again, the black tortoise stomped on Jiang Tian and he fell from 100,000 feet, crushing a mountain 30,000 feet tall. A few terrifying cracks appeared on the surface of the crystal-clear chaotic divine body. This image was also captured by the surveillance Dharma artifacts of the ruins of immortality. It was spread to every corner of the ruins of immortality through relay Dharma artifacts and displayed on billions of golden light screens. Kong Teichu can't withstand a single blow. He can't even defeat the beasts our ancestors subdued. He's just a commoner from an abandoned planet. How dare he try to overturn the world? He deserves to be beaten to death. Come, let's toast and set off fireworks. This time, the cheers spread throughout the ruins of immortality. It could be said that the entire ruins of immortality was like a ladle of hot oil being poured into cold water. Kill him, Black Tortoise. Stomp this arrogant place that offended the dynasty of the ruins of immortality to death. The fate of the invaders can only be food for the divine beasts. Countless cultivators and mortals were cheering for the Black Tortoise. Their voices converged into a torrent that rushed into the sky and resounded across the boundless land. Kong Teichu, I didn't expect you to be so weak. Fairy Jade Lotus stood proudly in the void, her figure graceful. The corners of the Chancellor's standard gown fluttered in the wind like a flag, making her look valiant and formidable. Her originally cold and solemn face also revealed a trace of a smile. Damn it. I wanted to use you to refine my cultivation, but I didn't expect to be beaten so badly. What a joke. A trace of anger flashed through Jiang Tian's heart. He had cultivated for 10,000 years, and his vision was unique and ruthless. Of course, he had already seen through the loopholes of the Black Tortoise. However, he had advanced too quickly during this period and had already reached the third level of the nascent soul realm. Although the acceleration effect of the time array disk had lengthened the time needed to break through, his foundation was still not very stable. Therefore, he wanted to use the Black Tortoise's battle to refine his cultivation and strengthen his foundation. After all, it was too difficult to find an opponent of equal strength. Although the Black Tortoise God's divine soul was powerful, his physical body was, after all, built later. Moreover, the person who built the body did not reach the peak of creation, so the soul and body were not harmonious and there were many loopholes. Otherwise, if it was a real natural divine beast at the soul formation stage, it would probably kill Jiang Tian with one slap. Jiang Tian rose into the air again. His eyes were slightly closed, as if he had fallen into silence. In his heart, there was no self, no other, no everything. Little fresh meat, you're still not dead. This time I'll eat you directly. The Black Tortoise let out a furious roar, opened its mouth, and charged again, filled with killing intent and viciousness. Purple lightning blade. Jiang Tian suddenly opened his eyes, and the lightning rings in his pupils flashed. The nascent souls in the spirit embryo opened their mouths at the same time, their eyes fierce as they suddenly roared. Chapter 1650. The chaotic laws on the 10-foot divine plate behind him turned into lightning laws and supplied Jiang Tian with endless energy. At this moment, Jiang Tian felt extremely powerful, as if he could fight against a void-returned supreme saint. Of course, this might be an illusion, but his strength had indeed soared. A purple lightning saber appeared in Jiang Tian's hand. The saber seemed to be formed by wisps of lightning. Although it still maintained its wild and terrifying state. What was different from before the chaotic divine body was that this purple lightning had chaotic aura lingering around it. It was clearly the chaotic divine lightning that could split heaven and earth apart. No, he has lightning laws. The Xianwu was shocked and fear appeared on its face. It turned around and ran away. Because its body wasn't natural, there were many loopholes. It could resist normal laws, but the lightning laws would definitely crack and invade it. And its divine soul was originally a lonely soul. Its body wasn't nourished enough and was even more afraid of lightning. However, it was too late to say anything. Jiang Tian slashed with his saber. The primal chaos divine lightning suddenly exploded. Terrifying lightning streaked across the sky, as if it could break through everything. It struck the Black Tortoise's body with ease. Heavenly Lord, please spare me. The Xianwu begged and screamed. A lightning ball as large as a mountain was formed and completely enveloped the Xianwu. Terrifying bolts of lightning drilled into its skin and went straight into its body, spreading and exploding crazily. Huge scales fell off, blood and flesh splattered, and black smoke billowed out. This was a shocking scene that was terrifying to the extreme. Jiang Tian hacked out with a blade. However, the divine laws contained within the blade continuously erupted with chaotic divine lightning, lasting for a long time. The lightning ball was as large as a mountain and was extremely bright like a star. There were even all kinds of phenomena. A giant lightning dragon roared, colorful thunderclouds rolled, and a sea of lightning surged. Everyone was shocked to see this. Thunder and lightning shot out in all directions. Each bolt was thicker than the last, so thick that it would take 5 or 6 people to wrap their arms around it. It was like a pillar that supported the heavens, like a sea-stabilizing divine needle, shooting outwards. Just the aftermath alone could probably kill a semi-god realm cultivator with one strike. As for the situation inside, no one could see anything clearly with their eyes or divine sense. Although Fairy Jade Lotus and many array masters were frantically activating the grand array of the ruins capital, they were so tired that they vomited blood and their faces were pale. They used the grand array of the ruins capital to absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth, the energy of crystals, the power of faith, and even the dragon chi in the dragon veins, and injected them into the black tortoise's body as if they were free, trying to repair its broken body. However, all resistance and remedies were useless against the law of primal chaos divine lightning. The Xianwu's roar became softer and softer, and its energy fell from the soul formation level to the peak stage nascent soul level, to the mid-stage nascent soul level, and then to the golden core level. Finally, bang! Many lightning bolts, flames, laws, and great Tao fragments dissipated. In the sky, the black tortoise had completely disappeared, leaving behind only wisps of green smoke and black fog. Fine. It was already nighttime. Half of the day had passed. It's time for me to destroy your ruined capital. What other divine arrays do you have? Jiang Tian did not even glance at the place where the black tortoise was. He sighed softly and looked at Jade Lotus Fairy, who was already pale and trembling in the sky. His eyes were like the eternal blue sky, indifferent to the extreme, without a trace of emotion. At this moment, Jiang Tian's clothes were torn and dirty, and he seemed to be in a sorry state. However, Fairy Jade Lotus felt a chill in her heart. She knew that Jiang Tian was only a nascent soul heavenly lord, but she felt that she was looking at a void-returned supreme saint. He was so powerful, vast, eternal, immortal, and unshakable. At this moment, the entire ruins of immortality was silent. No one could laugh anymore. Even such a powerful divine beast as the array spirit couldn't kill Jiang Tian. Instead, it was killed by Jiang Tian's sword. Who could stop him? Is the empire of the ruins of immortality really going to collapse? This thought appeared in many people's minds. Their bodies turned cold, and they felt as if their hearts had fallen into an abyss. At this moment, a trace of panic flashed across Fairy Jade Lotus's face. She thought that the black tortoise divine array might be broken, but she didn't expect it to be so fast. After all, this divine beast was very famous in ancient times. It was said that even the tyrant emperor and the other sages had a headache because of it. However, she quickly calmed down and said loudly, "Divine emperors, the array has been broken. I can't take it anymore. For the continuation of the empire of the ruins of immortality, please recover as soon as possible." What? The divine emperors are all going to recover? At this moment, the entire ruins of immortality was dead silent. Countless mortal cultivators were shocked. They stared at the light screen, unwilling to miss a scene. They saw it. Located in the northern part of the city, on the Wood Spirit Ancestral Mountain, which seemed to touch the heavens and the yellow springs, ancient and desolate sounds of worship rang out, carrying with them a sense of holiness. One after another, the doors engraved with ancient array patterns suddenly opened. One figure after another walked out, carrying with them an aura of vicissitudes of life, as if they had come from the end of ancient times. However, they were still incomparably powerful. The divine emperors have come out. Divine emperors, you have finally come out. Do you see it? Your subjects have died at the hands of the devil, and the earth has been stained with blood. Kill the devil Kong Te Chu. One by one, mortals and cultivators walked out from their shelters and stood on the streets, roofs, and squares. They bowed their heads to the ground and worshipped with incomparable fanaticism. The imperial power of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality was extremely worshipped because every divine emperor was a soul formation expert with great power. In the eyes of mortals and low-level cultivators, they were no different from gods. Therefore, the imperial power and the divine power merged into one, pushing the worship of the emperor to an unprecedented height. It could be said that as long as the divine emperors gave an order, mortals and cultivators would be willing to shed blood for it without the slightest hesitation. They would even treat it as a kind of glory. This could be seen in the previous battles. Many mortals and cultivators knew that they would die, but they still wanted to fight to the death with Jiang Tian. Being loyal to the empire and dying at the hands of Jiang Tian was already a kind of glory and a desire in the cultivators' hearts. The divine emperors of the past all wore golden dragon robes and flat imperial crowns with 12 hanging crowns. However, if one looked closely, their specific attire and temperament were different. Some wore horsetail whisks and Taoist robes, giving off an immortal and otherworldly aura. Some wore chainmail and heart-protecting mirrors, carrying long sabers and shields, as if they were old generals galloping on the battlefield. Some had an elegant temperament, holding brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone. Some had a simple temperament, like old farmers, carrying plowshares and holding bullwhips. Every divine emperor had their own characteristics and achievements. Some were recuperating, aloof from worldly affairs, and focused on the Tao. Some were literati, some were martial artists, some promoted irrigation and agriculture, and they pitted the mortal world and valued the mortal world. However, every divine emperor had a profound imperial aura and a torrential emperor chi. They controlled the laws of the great Tao, and their aura was solemn and dignified, giving people a feeling that they could not be provoked or blasphemed. Compared to the emperors of the mortal world, they were more than 100 times, or even 10,000 times stronger. No wonder the Ruins Emperor's dynasty was unshakable for tens of thousands of years. He's too strong. He was too strong. In comparison, what are the sect masters of the Grotto Heavens and the Guardian families? Many cultivators looked at him with admiration and sighed in their hearts. The previous deity emperors have all come out. How can Kong Te Chu withstand them? Feeling the monstrous power of the God Kings, some cultivators lost their fear of Jiang Tian and became full of confidence. Kong Te Chu, you've killed my honorable imperial family, killed my outstanding talent in governing the country, bullied my people, and brought disaster to my country. Your crimes are unforgivable. However, if you are willing to kneel before the steps of the Ruins Emperor's palace and repent for 100 years, my Ruins Emperor's palace will be lenient and spare you and the native descendants of the immortal ground. You will be permitted to guard the borders of my dynasty for generations to come. You will be slaves of the highest class. A deity emperor spoke, his voice shaking the heavens and earth. His attitude was haughty and arrogant, as if he were a superior being looking down at ants and insects. Even the emperors of the deity ground treated the lowly commoners like slaves. Treating Jiang Tian and the locals of the deity ground as slaves was already a great favor. Chapter 1651. This deity emperor was dressed in martial attire, which covered his extraordinarily mighty body. His majesty was shocking, and his domineering aura was boundless. He looked old, but his aura was still earth-shattering. The divine emperor of a dynasty is indeed domineering. He's the first divine emperor after the emperor of the ruins. He's also a direct descendant of the divine emperor. He spent his whole life fighting wars and conquering the world. He's known as the divine emperor of Wuji. Everyone admired him as if they were looking at a god. Some of the older cultivators talked about that divine emperor's background and achievements with deep reverence in their eyes. Jiang Tian didn't even bother to talk nonsense. He only replied with one word. Kill. Jiang Tian's figure flickered, and he became 10,000 zhang tall, almost as tall as the sky. Compared to him, the originally majestic 1,000-zhang-tall city wall was like a child's toy castle, minuscule and fragile to the extreme. At that moment, Jiang Tian didn't hold back anymore. He launched an all-out attack. Chaotic energy surged around his body. The 9 divine laws were added to his body, turning into chaos, yin and yang, splitting the world and activating the chaotic divine body to the extreme. Like the sun in the sky, he soared into the sky, his foot pierced through the clouds like a meteor striking the continent, creating flames as it brushed against the layer of qi. Suddenly, he stomped on the many deity emperors. At that moment, billions of cultivators and mortals inside and outside the ruins of deity were startled. Kang Teichu really dares to attack? It could be said that no one had expected Jiang Tian to make a move as soon as he saw so many god emperors. Jiang Tian had already killed a lot of soul formation cultivators so far. He had crossed hundreds of thousands of miles and broken dozens of lines of defense. His energy consumption was terrifying. Even a soul formation cultivator would vomit blood and dry up his energy. Besides, Jiang Tian was only a nascent soul cultivator. It was like an athlete who had taken a stimulant. Even if he was able to exert super strength, he would still be exhausted and even be hurt. Everyone thought that Jiang Tian would pretend to be polite and buy some time to recover his energy and true essence. But Jiang Tian was like a perpetual motion machine that never knew fatigue. He didn't stop for a second and immediately attacked. "How dare you!" shouted a deity emperor. He slashed with his machete. Suddenly, the great path of saber light swept across the sky and tore it apart. It was like a long river that could cut through thousands of mountains. That attack was as powerful as a soul formation cultivator, making many grand cultivators pale in comparison. It was fierce and domineering. The 8th deity emperor Ba Dao. Someone who recognized him said, "This deity emperor was extremely vicious and murderous." He implemented an extreme centralization of power, monitoring the grotto heavens, thousands of sects, and the 9 guards were all directly responsible to him, becoming an extension of his consciousness. Even many disobedient members of the royal family were killed. In terms of cultivation level, he mainly cultivated in the army formula and wholeness formula of the 9 great heavenly arts of the ruins Emperor's Palace. He could unleash the limits of his weapon, allowing his attacks to increase by 100 times in a short period of time. The might of his strike even exceeded that of a god emperor, blazing divine emperor. Boom! Jiang Tian's feet didn't even stop. He stomped down like a star hitting the ground. The power of the chaotic divine body was terrifying. It was equivalent to the dharma of the 9 divine bodies gathered together. Together with the source stone cauldron, it had the power of a world. Even if the headmaster or the sword god were there, they would be trampled to death. Not to mention deity Emperor Ba Dao. Crack crack. The tyrannical emperor's blade cracked as soon as it collided with deity Emperor Ba Dao's blade. It was a quasi-sacred weapon, but it couldn't withstand Jiang Tian's foot. Fragments of saber Dao scattered in all directions. Deity Emperor Ba Dao was covered in blood and fell from the sky step by step as if he were being crushed by Mount Buzhou. Even if he roared with all his might, ignited the burning divine body, and used the wholeness formula crazily, his divine body emitting thousands of rays of dazzling light. His power and dharma increased again and again, there was nothing he could do. Jiang Tian's foot still pressed down at a seemingly slow speed. It was extremely firm and unchangeable. "I'll help you." Another deity emperor attacked. Although he was dressed as an emperor, his trousers were rolled up and his hair was loose. He looked like an old farmer. He waved the bullwhip in his hand and threw the plowshares, which turned into dharma and hit Jiang Tian. It was the 7th deity emperor, Jing Nong deity emperor. He was an emperor who valued the people and the mortals. In that generation, there were thousands of cultivators, including soul formation and nascent soul cultivators, who worked for the people and worked for them. They cast spells, made clouds and rain, changed the weather, turned land into rivers, and developed irrigation. There were also cultivators like the drug god who treated the mortals. There were also academies that opened dozens of branches all over the territory, such as the Tianyuan branch and the Clear Lake branch. They were all over the ruins of immortality and the second-level worlds. It could be said that in Jing Nong Deity Emperor's generation, the world was peaceful and the people were happy. The support and loyalty of the mortal cultivators to the dynasty reached its peak. Even the conflicts with the mortal world were greatly alleviated. His Dharma law was the Dharma law of respect for farmers, which was contained in the plowshares and was very rare. He saw all kinds of strange phenomena of farming and people's livelihood. There was the vigorous movement of the heavens, the vigorous vigor of unceasing self-improvement. There was also the stability of the earth, the vastness of the earth, the sharpness of metal, the intertwining of iron and blood, the softness of hardness and softness. Ah, this is interesting. Jiang Tian smiled and continued to suppress. But how could two deity emperors stop Jiang Tian? Even if Jiang Tian didn't use his nascent soul and dharma power, his chaotic divine body was equivalent to 9 divine bodies, each of which was comparable to a soul formation divine body. Besides, he had even used the stone cauldron. Arg! Deity Emperor Jing Nong's dharma laws and dharma laws also collapsed. He looked painful and spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't withstand Jiang Tian's power at all. His bones cracked as if they were about to break. This is too terrifying. Many cultivators were shocked and their expressions turned serious. The two deity emperors had joined forces and used their trump cards, but they still couldn't withstand Jiang Tian's kick. More importantly, Jiang Tian didn't even stop. He was apparently suppressing them. Me too. Count me in. Swish, swish, swish. Dharma laws boiled, grand Daos rumbled and deities shouted. In a blink, a few more deity emperors shot to the sky and tried to resist Jiang Tian's kick. In the end, all the deity emperors had attacked, except for the first deity emperor, Wuji. Rumble. The power of the deity emperors was so terrifying that it was earth-shattering. In addition, every single divine emperor had their own strengths and matchless contributions. Based on this, they formed their own unique natural laws and great Tao. Together with the support of the ruins of immortality's 9 great heavenly method secret arts, they were full of flexibility, increasing their strength by several times or even dozens of times. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they had the power to destroy the world and destroy a large planet. But damn! The sky trembled as space exploded apart. Numerous laws surged like rivers while expanse after expanse of grand Daos floated in the sky like mountains. All sorts of flames, rays of light, and auspicious colors erupted with dazzling light and blazing might, and they wanted to resist the suppression of Jiang Tian's foot. But it was still useless. Jiang Tian's kick quickly pressed down a few hundred feet, making many deity emperors spit out blood and feel extremely uncomfortable. "We can't hold on any longer," they cried. After all, many deity emperors had reached the end of their lifespans and had been in a state of blood freezing for a long time. They had just woken up and didn't have enough true essence, dharma laws, and grand Daos. Ah, Jade Lotus, use the blood-transforming Python Royal Array. Kong Teichu must die. Deity Emperor Wuji, who was in charge of controlling and commanding, didn't panic. A glint of determination flashed in his eyes and he sighed. Yes. When Jade Lotus Fairy heard this, her expression did not change. Her slender white hands formed a seal and flicked her fingers. The blood-transforming Python Royal Array is said to be one of the strongest arrays in the ruined capital. It's comparable to the Divine Beast Array. Some cultivators were shocked when they heard this. The ultimate array is about to be used. Kong Teichu, I'll teach you a lesson. Kong Teichu must die. Demon, die. The dynasty will never be defeated. Deity Emperors, do your best. Defeat this demon. In the ruined capital, many mortals, whether they were nobles or commoners, raised their arms and cheered for the deity emperors. They cursed Jiang Tian viciously and looked at Jade Lotus Fairy with worship as if they were looking at a guardian. Then they saw. As Fairy Jade Lotus flicked her finger, the streets of the ruined capital bloomed with brilliant light. Many of the talisman arrays on the buildings seemed to be flowing with golden light. Spiritual power fluctuated, and light flashed. At this moment, the entire ruined capital was like heaven. At this moment, the ruined capital turned into an array, a famous array, the blood-transforming Python Royal Array. So beautiful. It's like heaven. So, our ruined capital is an array. It's the magic of seizing creation. Oh, our great empire! Many mortal cultivators smiled and exclaimed in intoxication. Their eyes were blurred as if they had lost their souls. At this moment, the buildings were glittering with translucent patterns, illuminating the night sky. It was extremely beautiful, like a celestial palace that didn't belong to the mortal world. But suddenly, bam bam bam. The power of all the talisman formations erupted in an instant. The light was extremely bright. On the streets, on the roofs, in the rooms, in the plazas, in the taverns, in the shops, all the mortals did not even have the time to scream before they suddenly collapsed, turning into a rain of blood and mountains of flesh. At this moment, the cities within a radius of dozens of miles turned into seas of blood, pools of blood, and forests of flesh. The smell of blood surged into the sky and the wind howled. It was as if the souls were unwilling to die and were wailing like ghosts. In the sky, thunder exploded. Dark clouds rolled across the sky and heavy rain poured down. This was the connection between heaven and man. Heaven and earth were lamenting and praising. Because the array exploded too quickly, these mortals didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. Some were crushed into pieces by the powerful magic power and spread out like flowers, forming blood membranes that were hundreds of meters wide. Some were pulled into thin threads, and some were sucked dry of blood or some kind of element, turning into dried corpses. They died in all kinds of strange ways, like abstract installations made by modern artists. It was beyond the scope of ordinary imagination. Millions of people died in every city. There were even tens of millions of casualties. The entire ruined capital, the 9 cities, had at least 100 million people. The ruined capital had turned into a dead city in a matter of minutes and seconds. Except for those nascent soul and soul formation cultivators who were still floating in the sky or hiding in various fortresses. Only those light screens were still shining alone, but there was no audience. Under the effect of the entire array, waves of blood surged and turned into blood food. Like red tentacles, they meandered through the sky and entered the bodies of the divine emperors. Supreme Tao of Emperor Python, drink blood and absorb marrow, sublimate to the extreme. Fairy Jade Lotus's face was as calm as a lake as she lightly shouted. At this moment, the deity emperors, who were originally in a state of decline, suddenly regained their vigor and strength. Some of them even had their hair turned black and their teeth fell off. They quickly entered the prime of their lives and became vigorous and vigorous. Moreover, they even had a trace of demonic aura. They were more than twice as strong as before. Chapter 1652. In order to continue our roots and keep our civilization alive, we can only sacrifice you. I believe that if you are in heaven, you will understand and smile with relief. In the ruins Emperor's Palace, Star-Lord Tianhe and the others saw all this through the light screen. Their faces were filled with sorrow as they knelt on the ground, paying the highest respect to the dead. My husband! How magnificent! With billions of blood essence, we nourished the past divine emperors and fought to live on, just so that the troubled wood spirit civilization can survive. Young people like Prince Xiahe, who was not ruthless enough, were grief-stricken and shed tears. Among them were their old friends, loved ones, and even their wives and children. The plan for the blood cocoon imperial array had long been drawn up. Even the royal family, as long as they did not have cultivation, would be treated equally. They would all be turned into blood food to support the divine emperors to recover to their peak state. Boom! Jiang Tian's foot was lifted thousands of feet by the combined force of the divine emperors. With the combined force of many divine emperors, they pushed Jiang Tian out of the city. Impressive! Jiang Tian's face was slightly surprised as he praised. For the sake of the overall benefit, tens of millions of people were sacrificed in an instant. Only with such courage and fortitude could a cultivation dynasty that had lasted for 10,000 years and never declined. Before the rise and fall of a civilization, ethics and morality, good and evil, were all nonsense. Only survival was the most important thing. Otherwise, if you were completely wiped out without leaving a single trace behind, so what if you were kind and beautiful? You would no longer exist and no one would remember you. Kong Te Chu, that's all you've got? Fairy Jade Lotus sneered, full of mockery. So what if he was strong? He was just a lone person from a remote planet with no foundation. How could he shake the ruins of Immortality Dynasty that had existed for 10,000 years and had a deep foundation? It was like an ant trying to shake a tree or an egg trying to hit a rock. This was the power of a dynasty that included grotto heavens, sects, and aristocratic families. Who could match them when they joined forces? Kong Te Chu, you can't even do anything to us. You want to make an enemy out of the empire of the immortal ruins? The old ruins emperor has yet to appear and divine emperor Wu Ji has yet to take action. If he did, he would have killed you with a single strike. Celestial Emperor Ba Dao roared. Kong Te Chu, you are but an abandoned ant from the abandoned wasteland. Your vision is too shallow. You don't know the vastness of the starry sky, the vastness of the universe, and the greatness of my immortal ruins imperial court. Jing Nong Godly Emperor also sneered. Kong Te Chu, kneel down and beg for mercy. If you are sincere in your repentance, then sign a divine soul contract with me. I'll spare your life. Divine Emperor Wu Ji made the final decision and shouted. At this moment, Dako's group of heroes looked at the light screen worriedly. How cruel and vicious. To actually feed on the flesh and blood of tens of thousands of people to raise his cultivation. The past deity emperors have already recovered to their peak state. Senior Tai Chu is in danger. Jiang Tian's feet were blocked by many deity emperors. But in fact, the empire of the immortal ruins still had trump cards that they hadn't used yet. There were still some more ancient and powerful beings who hadn't shown their hand. They sacrificed tens of millions of people to kill His Majesty Tai Chu, which means that what they want to protect is more important than those people and their own lives. Bai Mushue's clear eyes glittered with wisdom. Her face was calm, but there was a thunderous sound in her mind. She took out her Dharma artifact and made a series of hand seals, quickly calculating and calculating. She wanted to see through the fog and get to the truth. She had become more and more resilient and had already pulled herself away from the sadness of the death of her master, Fairy Ruelong. Many cultivators of the ruins of immortality revealed joyful smiles, as if they had been relieved of a heavy burden, as if they had gotten their revenge. Inside the ruins' emperor's palace, many members of the royal family, aristocrats, and ministers were cheering. Jiang Tian, who was pushed out of the city and flew up into the sky, suddenly snorted and mocked. You are just a few ants. You dare to guess my power and talk with me about the vastness of the universe and the starry sky? You are really ridiculous. Fine, I'll let the empire of the immortal ruins and all the cultivators and mortals in the immortal ruins see the power of a divine soul. The chaotic nine orifices divine infant in Jiang Tian's body suddenly opened its eyes and yelled at Jiang Tian, Thunder slaughter divine law. After a roar, thunder rumbled and a giant thunderbolt was 10 times more powerful than when Jiang Tian released the purple thunder blade. Everyone only saw that the thunder divine laws formed a giant thunder slaughter heavenly elephant behind Jiang Tian. It roared and stomped on the ground anxiously. A thunder divine law could create countless thunder dragons and thunderclouds. And this thunder slaughter divine beast had more than 10 million thunder divine laws. Its destructive power was almost earth-shattering. Boom! Lightning flashed and the sky shook as if it were about to be torn apart. The entire sky above the immortal ruins was chaotic and the stars in the sky were distorted, as if they were about to fall. Seeing this, many divine emperors were startled. They had used the blood slaughter imperial array to devour the blood of others to forcefully increase their power, which went against the laws of nature and was extremely cruel. Even if they had the reason to suppress their inner demons and stabilize their minds, it was still a fact that they had killed millions of their own kind after all. Their minds would inevitably be damaged and their bodies would have many flaws. Thunderbolts, on the other hand, were extremely strong and violent, which could easily destroy unstable bodies. Besides, thunderbolts were powerful and terrifying. When they fought with their minds, they would create great pressure and attack the flaws in people's minds. At this moment, they all felt extremely pressured, as if there were mountains pressing down on them. In an instant, their minds were filled with evil thoughts and they lost their minds. Regret, sadness, guilt, hatred, anger, shame, jealousy, greed. All kinds of negative and dark emotions coiled around their minds like poisonous snakes and gnawed at their minds. The thunder slaughter divine law hadn't really been suppressed yet. It was just releasing its power, and the divine emperors had already descended a few hundred feet. But this still wasn't the end. Red Bird! Xianxia yelled. His nascent soul voice was sharp and loud, like a demon or a god. The divine disc spun, and the vermilion bird divine law manifested itself into a giant vermilion bird. It was as if a giant artificial sun had risen above the ruined city. Flames refined the sky and burned the heavens. The terrifying temperature evaporated the sea of blood, turned the rocks and bricks into dust, and even melted metal. The other cultivators in the sky couldn't take it anymore. The golden core cultivators were instantly turned into dried corpses, and the nascent soul cultivators and soul formation cultivators felt extremely uncomfortable. They all went into cover and activated all kinds of defensive arrays and restrictions. Everyone, we've used the blood of millions of people to forcefully increase our power just to kill Kong Teichu. If we can't do it, we won't be forgiven. We'll forever be in hell and be tortured by the fire of karma. It's time to fight with our lives. Divine Emperor Wuji's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he roared and shot into the sky. For the wood spirit civilization, for our descendants. Explode. He was extremely ruthless and chose to explode his gods. At that moment, it was as if a sun had risen in the sky under Jiang Tian's feet. Its unparalleled destructive power could move mountains, fill oceans, and destroy the moon. Explode! 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 Not only him, Badeo, Jingnong, and the other divine emperors shouted at the same time. Endless determination flashed in their eyes as they chose to explode their gods. 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. At that moment, his energy and power were raised to the limit, as if there was no limit. The great Tao of heaven and earth vibrated together, and all kinds of ancient chants sounded. Many cultivators felt that the entire world seemed to become soft and fragile. That was because the essence Qi, Dharma laws, and great Tao were being pulled away. 9 gods exploding at the same time was equivalent to 9 void return saints attacking together. It caused a hurricane of Dharma laws and great Tao to collapse. With Jiang Tian as the center, a vortex of Dharma laws and great Tao with a radius of 100 miles formed and was about to destroy Jiang Tian. The previous divine emperors died at the same time. Many gods exploded at the same time. At that moment, heaven and earth were overturned and the sun and moon were reversed. Too many precepts and fragments of the great Tao were like silk ribbons, waterfalls, rivers, suns and moons, divine beasts and immortal birds. They were rolling, rubbing, and violently colliding. Thousands of changes occurred in an instant, and the world was turned upside down. The power was too terrifying. It actually struck out strands of chaotic aura, tearing apart the primordial chaotic aura of the source stone cauldron and attacking Jiang Tian. In the end, that place was in complete chaos. With the eyesight and divine senses of others, it was impossible to see clearly. Divine emperors. The previous divine emperors are all dead. Rest in peace, divine emperors. We will not forget the wishes of the previous divine emperors and bring glory to the wood spirit civilization. Ignite the fire seed of the wood spirit civilization on every star and illuminate the entire universe. Many members of the royal family of the ruins of immortality were crying for the death of the divine emperors, but they also thought that Jiang Tian had died and heaved a sigh of relief. Heavenly the arch! Heavenly the arch! Senior Tai Chu. Many of the great bandits' assassins exclaimed in shock and sighed with regret. Do you think you can kill me by exploding your gods? A sigh came from the vortex of Dharma laws and great Tao. Chapter 1653. That's Kong Techu's voice. He's not dead yet. At this moment, many cultivators of the ruins of deity were stunned as if they had been struck by lightning. They couldn't believe it. Ocean calming. As Jiang Tian yelled, the terrifying ocean calming divine law was cast and instantly covered the entire sky above the ruins of deity. Vital chi, plants, clouds, and even space were all frozen in place. The whirlpool of precepts and great paths that had been spinning endlessly suddenly became motionless like an abstract painting. Even the falling or rolling bodies of the divine emperors were frozen in place. Their determination, serenity, and even relief before their deaths could still be seen on their severed heads. Ta! Jiang Tian yelled again. Boom! A black Tao Tai that was as strong as a mountain but with a bigger head and mouth appeared. Its eyes were full of greed. It was the manifestation of the Tao Tai divine law. The Tao Tai shook its head and turned into a giant black hole with an unparalleled swallowing power. It swallowed all the Dharma laws and Tao in a few seconds. Then, it turned into a ray of black light and went into Jiang Tian's divine disk. Great, the divine souls, Dharma laws and Tao of the divine emperors are all mine. More importantly, they also absorbed the blood of tens of millions of people, which is a supreme resource. It's enough for me to reach the fourth level of the nascent soul level. A satisfied expression appeared on Jiang Tian's face as he nodded to himself. No matter how strong Jiang Tian's mind was, it wasn't the Tao of God. He couldn't get rid of all emotions and desires and cut off all karma. Swallowing the blood and lives of tens of millions of people would also cause his Tao heart to become unstable. It could easily lead to an inner demon tribulation and become a stumbling block on Jiang Tian's cultivation path. But after being tormented by the divine emperors, it would be wonderful. Jiang Tian wouldn't have any inner demons at all. After all, he wasn't the one who killed them. He had killed many divine emperors and avenged the poor people of the ruins of deity. Clouds were gloomy in the sky and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Above the ruins of immortality, the laws wailed and the great Tao trembled. Many deity emperors had fallen. Jiang Tian and the others had devoured too many great Tao laws. The heaven and man connection had caused the heaven and earth to be filled with anger and sorrow. Jiang Tian stood proudly in the sky. His black robe fluttered like a flag, making him look like a demon or a god. It was extremely shocking. He killed all the previous divine emperors by himself. No, to be exact, the deity emperors have already sensed that they are no match for Kong Techu, so they chose to self-destruct and perish together with Kong Techu, but they still failed. At this point, the millions upon millions of cultivators and mortals in the ruins of immortality were all terrified and dumbfounded. Every deity emperor of the past was extremely talented and had a powerful cultivation base. Every single one of them worked hard to govern the country, and they were skilled in both civil and martial arts. They had made illustrious contributions, and their names were known throughout the ages. The emperor's majesty soared to the heavens and destroyed the earth. The imperial power was unparalleled. All the previous deity emperors were attacking Jiang Tian. What a grand lineup! It could be said that this was a rare sight throughout history. Moreover, they had also borrowed the flesh and blood of tens of millions of people in the ruins of immortality to forcefully raise their cultivation bases and restore them to their peak state. It was equivalent to many deity emperors in their prime crossing time and space to attack Jiang Tian together. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality all thought that Kong Techu was dead for sure and were full of confidence. But they never expected this to be the result. How is this possible? Fairy Jade Lotus felt her entire body turn cold as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Her face turned snow-white and she could not even stand steadily. Reality was so cruel. This Kong Techu was simply a legendary immortal. No matter what methods the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality used or what trump cards they used, Kong Techu would easily resolve them and deal with them. It was as if he would never be defeated. At this moment, she felt that the Jiang Tian she was facing was not on the same level as her at all. The cultivators of the ruins of immortality were ants. At this moment, the entire ruins emperor's palace was dead silent. Some soft sobbing sounds could be heard. Some people were crying like injured beasts, like frightened and helpless babies, filled with endless misery and despair. It was Chancellor Xianhu. Sob, 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 sob. We lost 90 million living people, our own kind, became food for blood. We still lost. We lost so miserably. Even the 9 deity emperors together lost. He didn't lie. What he said to the teacher was true. He must be an immortal. We provoked someone we shouldn't have. 10,000 years ago, when we stepped into the ruins of immortality, we were destined to end up like this. Annihilation of the country, the extinction of the race, and the extinction of the race. At this moment he was lying on the ground, his hair disheveled, and he was shivering. Tears and snot were rolling down his face. His forehead was on the ground and his hands were clutching his head. He was crying and laughing at the same time. His eyes were glazed over like a mad dog. Is he crazy? Prince Xianxia said with grief and sympathy. He's crazy. Another person nodded with certainty. Chancellor Xian, who was a divine physician of his generation and was as famous as the divine medicine god. He was kind-hearted and loved life. He loved the wonders of nature. He often left food for rats and didn't light a candle for moths. He couldn't even bear to kill an ant. How serious would it be to see tens of millions of lives being destroyed in an instant? He's crazy. Tianhe Lord's face was cold. He suddenly unleashed a divine power and pointed at Xianhu. Xianhu's 7 orifices were bleeding and he fell to the ground. Everyone was silent. They were already numb to death. Even if Kong Teichu can break the array of the ruins of immortality, how can he be a match for that ancestral patriarch? At this time, the heavenly river star sovereign said softly, "Are you talking about ancestral patriarch Songming?" Prince Xianxia asked in fear. What? Ancestral patriarch Songming isn't dead? Some noble plain cultivators exclaimed in disbelief. Ancestral patriarch Songming was an overlord who had followed the Emperor of Ruins to conquer the world. He had once been invincible and defeated thousands of soldiers and horses. His strength was earth-shattering and earth-shattering. In a word, his status was much higher than that of teacher Yu Xing, sword god, and Tianhe Lord. Otherwise, given Tianhe Lord's noble status, why would he call him ancestral patriarch? However, many people said that they couldn't withstand the erosion of time. Their lifespans had dried up and they had died of old age. Are we going to revive the ancestral general this time? Prince Xiahe's voice trembled. He was extremely excited. A member of the royal family looked at the nobles who didn't know the inside story and explained softly, "This is a top secret. This is a top secret. Ordinary people don't know about Dynasty's trump card. Ancestral patriarch Songming isn't really dead. It's just that his lifespan is almost up and he can't use his dermic power easily. It's sealed in the divine source as the final foundation. It was originally used to deal with the cultivators from other planets when the world was in danger. Now, I'm afraid we have to break out of the seal. There's no other way. Kong Teichu is too vicious. We have to bet everything. This is our last trump card." Tianhe Lord heaved a long sigh, but his eyes were filled with endless determination. At this moment he faced the north of the city, where the wood spirit's ancestral peak was. He kowtowed and shouted, "Ancestral patriarch, please come out. The world is about to be destroyed." As soon as he finished, boom, an unimaginable energy shot to the sky. The entire ruins capital and even half of the ruins of deity trembled. Ancestral patriarch? Which ancestral patriarch is it? How can a lord call him ancestral patriarch? Countless cultivators in the entire ruins of deity, whether they were nascent soul, golden core, or soul formation cultivators, knelt on the ground in confusion and shock. Everyone was astonished and they all looked over. Boom. The wood spirit's ancestral peak was more than 10,000 feet tall with layers of green. It was like a lonely peak piercing the sky. Suddenly, there was an explosion of light that lit up the sky. Even the stars in the sky were dim. Countless Tao laws were rumbling and trembling. Many pieces of the grand Tao floated up and down like diamonds and gold. They were crystal clear and glittered like stars. Countless runes and talisman arrays seemed to have been activated and let out beams of light. The immortal palaces and divine watchtowers were all releasing auspicious splendor, taking in and sending out multicolored light. It was as if they had awakened, welcoming their masters. Could it be the old ruins emperor? Countless cultivators and mortals stared at the light screen in awe. Or the previous generations of the ruins emperor. Some even suspected that it was an old monster from the era of the Wood Spirit planet or the era of the Tyrant Emperor. How high was the status of the Sky River Lord? He was one of the 3 giants who could be on par with the Teacher and the Sword God. Even the previous generations of divine emperors obeyed him because he had assisted them in the past. Obviously, ordinary seniors weren't enough to be called ancestral patriarch by the Sky River Lord. Even if it's not the old ruins emperor, it's his peer or even his predecessor. At this moment, the atmosphere in the fallen deity sea was extremely tense. Yun Zhongzi's face was extremely serious as he spoke slowly. This ancestral patriarch's aura was too terrifying when he appeared. At this moment, many dragon veins spat out spirit chi like a long river or a waterfall, surging towards the ruins emperor's palace and the Wood Spirit's ancestral peak. The 9 dragon veins trembled and roared. There were even dragon roars from the ancient times, as if 9 dragons had come back to life and were guarding a pearl. Could it be an old monster at the half-step void return realm? Jiang Tian was a little surprised. Jiang Tian had studied the spirit qi in the ruins of immortality. It was too thin. Even if he drained the pond, he couldn't find a void return realm saint. That meant that the ruins emperor's cultivation was likely to stop at the soul formation realm. However, even if the old ruins emperor came back to life, Jiang Tian wasn't afraid at all. Although he had only been in seclusion for 7 days, he had already reached the 3rd level of the nascent soul realm. With absolute heaven sword, he had cultivated several supreme divine powers. Those trump cards were prepared for the void return realm. Using those supreme divine powers would certainly deplete his life force and even reduce his lifespan. However, he couldn't care less because of the urgency of the matter. Even if it's a void return realm old monster, I'll slay him with my sword. Jiang Tian's eyes were resolute and his face was as cold as steel. Boom! An aura like that of a primordial beast erupted on the Wood Spirit's ancestral peak. It started from the nascent soul realm, broke through the late-stage nascent soul realm, peak-stage nascent soul realm, and reached the soul formation realm. It continued to rise as if there was no end to it. Just as Jiang Tian was waiting with a frown, the aura suddenly disappeared. At the peak of the Wood Spirit ancestral peak, the ancient door opened, and a figure that was completely enveloped in pitch black and icy cold armor that even covered his face walked out from within. He wore a cloak that was scarlet red like blood, and he wore bronze boots that were mottled with rust. He carried a ghastly aura of death and filth, and he seemed like a ghost general that had walked out from hell. Chapter 1654. The ancestral patriarch walked forward step by step. His bronze boots didn't make a loud sound when he stepped on the rocks, but every cultivator's heart was pounding. His might was monstrous. His armor was dark and deep, and a mask with complicated patterns covered his face. Only his scarlet eyes could be seen. His gaze was cruel and cold, and his silver hair fluttered in the wind. On his withered hands, his fingernails were long and curved, like peerless heavenly hooks. His silver hair fluttered even though there was no wind. He glanced down and said coldly, "My name is Tsang Ming. I am the old ruins emperor, Zhu Tian's uncle and master. For you, who woke me up?" Every word he spat out was like metal falling to the ground, sonorous and sharp. His voice seemed to have come from the depths of hell, making everyone's hearts tremble and chills run down their spines. Its divine general Tsang Ming. Someone who was at the level of a living fossil suddenly realized what was going on. His face was filled with shock as he couldn't help but shout. "It's him. He's still alive." The other cultivators were all shocked and their expressions changed drastically. In the history of the ruins of immortality, this person's name could be said to have shocked the ancient and dazzled the contemporaries, leaving behind a thick stroke of ink and color. Legend had it that Song Ming was an elite when the overlord of Planet Wood Spirit was still alive. He formed a golden core at a record-breaking speed and was regarded highly by the overlord, who gave him an important position. When Planet Wood Spirit was swallowed by the third planet, Song Ming drove many space cities and battleships to hide behind planets and sailed to the second planet system in the South Gate. It was said that during the era of Space City, Song Ming had piloted his space battleship many times to burn and loot the ferocious beasts that passed by to replenish Space City. It could be said that he had survived hundreds of battles and was extraordinarily valiant. He had even trained the Old Ruins Emperor, Zhu Tian. During the battle between the descendants of Planet Wood Spirit and the natives of the Deity Ground, he helped the Old Ruins Emperor to conquer the ruins of Deity, the desert, the fertile land, High Lan, and many other planets. Any planet, any world, would tremble at the mere mention of its name. He was extremely cruel and bloodthirsty. His hands were stained with the blood of the natives of the Deity Ground, and he was known as the Executioner. He had already become a soul formation cultivator and was not far from the void return level. If it weren't for the limited spirit chi in the ruins of Deity and the destruction of Planet Wood Spirit, he would have reached the void return level already. It's Song Ming. Rumor has it that he fell in battle. How could he suddenly appear? Niu Duotian Yun Zhongzi and the other big bandits were shocked and terrified. It wasn't that he was afraid of death. Rather, he was worried for Jiang Tian. It was just that this development was too unexpected. It could be said that even if the Old Ruins Emperor were to appear, they would not be so shocked and terrified. This was because Divine General Songming was simply too powerful. During the Dao Damage era, he had fought the first half of the invasion by the descendants of the Wood Spirit Star. Back then, the Old Ruins Emperor had even had to listen to his orders. However, as his lifespan grew old and the Old Ruins Emperor Zhu Tian grew up, he abdicated. This was an existence that had existed for tens of thousands of years. He had suppressed the Tyrant Emperor era, the Dao Damage era, and the Ruins Emperor era. His talent and strength were definitely not inferior to the Old Ruins Emperor, Zhu Tian. His vast dermic powers were also extremely powerful, striking fear into the hearts of others. Your Majesty, absolute beginning, retreat. At that moment, Yun Zhongzi could no longer maintain his calm and leisurely demeanor as he cried out in fear, not caring about his image. Only a descendant of the divine general of the previous heavenly court like him, who had thoroughly studied the history of the ruins of immortality, knew how terrifying Songming was in history and what kind of danger Jiang Tian was facing. I'm afraid it's too late. Niu Duotian's eyes were filled with despair while Tu Fei clenched his fists. The moment Songming appeared, they knew that Jiang Tian was truly in danger this time. Songming had hidden himself deep within the Wood Spirit ancestral mountain for tens of thousands of years. Once he appeared, he would definitely pay a heavy price. He might even die. And now, he would also know that he was facing the double crisis of the expansion of the Third Star and Jiang Tian's new heavenly court. With this mentality of certain death, he would kill Jiang Tian and rid his race of all future troubles. Fairy Jade Lotus flew out and used her immortal will to tell him about all the major changes. Then, she knelt down and said with tears in her eyes, I'm the personal disciple of the headmaster of the academy. I'm Jade Lotus, an unworthy junior. I beg the ancestral patriarch to suppress this monster and bring peace to the ruins of immortality, washing away the hatred and humiliation of our dynasty. Boom. When Fairy Jade Lotus finished speaking, Songming suddenly looked up. His silver hair flowed backward like a waterfall and his red eyes burst out with flames and thunderbolts, burning down the space with crackling sounds. A monstrous murderous intent instantly enveloped the entire ruins of immortality, suppressing even the smell of blood from the deaths of tens of thousands of people. He hadn't spoken yet, but his soul energy alone made all the cultivators of the ruins of immortality feel a chill in their hearts, as if they were enveloped by a fierce god. A native of the deity land. After being defeated, how dare you disturb my sleep, mess up my great country and offend the dignity of our dynasty? Did you eat a dragon's heart or a Chilin's gall? How dare you kill my civilians, destroy my cities and slaughter my cultivators? Every word of Songming's was like a heavy hammer hitting everyone's hearts, making them feel heavy and oppressed, making them feel very uncomfortable. He looked Jiang Tian up and down a few times, the corners of his mouth forming an extremely mocking smile as he sneered. You're just a nascent soul cultivator, but your body is quite strong. No wonder you could kill kids like Teacher and Sword God. But that's all there is to it. Your divine power, on the other hand, is not only domineering but also very tough. Your technique seems to be even more powerful than the teachings of the ancient heavenly court of the previous dynasty. Are you an alien cultivator? An alien cultivator? Everyone was confused. Many people were shocked. Sky River Star Lord even blurted out, Senior Songming, I'm the Palace Lord of Sky Palace, Sky River Star Lord. Could it be that the Audiorium Senior spoke of is referring to the star that Jiang Taichu came from? No, his teachings are even better than Sword God's. Songming said in a low voice. His technique should come from the legendary Central Galaxy. It's vast and has an ancient aura. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Jade Lotus Fairy couldn't believe it. She said, Ancestral Patriarch, you must be mistaken. We've already found out his identity. He's Kong Techu from Ancient Earth, also known as Planet East. Is that true? Songming looked at Jiang Tian in disbelief. Jiang Tian didn't need to hide it. He said calmly, yes. That's so strange. Songming was confused. He sighed and said, Planet East is a planet abandoned by the ancient heavenly court. The creatures on it are all abandoned people. They're as uncivilized as pigs and dogs, as weak and pitiful as insects. How could such a powerful being be born? He sneered and said, but one thing is for sure. We destroyed the ancient heavenly court, washed the deity ground with blood, and killed their talents. 80,000 years ago, there was Xing Huang Zhongli. 20,000 years ago, there was Ao Huang. Now there's Kong Techu. Our only regret is that we weren't ruthless enough back then. We should have occupied the ruins of deity while pushing our way to Planet East to eliminate the source of trouble. Otherwise, you wouldn't have appeared out of nowhere and taken revenge. Songming shook his head as if it were a pity. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. Earth is destined to fail as long as I'm around. Jiang Tian shook his head and said coldly, Aunt, it's time for you to surrender and repent. Lowly peasant, you have no idea what kind of powerful being you're facing. Fairy Jade Lotus's celestial bearing was unparalleled. Her figure was exquisite and graceful. Her jade face was delicate and pretty, untainted by a speck of dust. She coldly scolded, high and mighty, no longer showing any fear. It was as if Songming's presence gave her something to rely on and Jiang Tian couldn't do anything to her. Go to hell. Jiang Tian's eyes turned cold. He suddenly made a move and waved his fingers. Kuan Peng Annihilation Blade. Under the Kuan Peng divine law, the dimension was split into two. Jade Lotus Fairy was cut in half at the waist. The Kuan Peng Annihilation Dharma stirred wildly. Dazzling divine blood and flesh rain instantly dyed the sky red. Kong Techu, how dare you kill me? Jade Lotus Fairy screamed as her divine treasures collapsed. She was cut into pieces. Even her divine soul was ground into powder by countless dharma of sword Tao and dissipated into thin air. The dimension shook and heaven and earth roared again. Rain poured down from the sky above the ruins of deity and thunder exploded. Everyone was dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. This Jiang Taichu was too domineering. He was simply too arrogant. To Jiang Tian, killing Jade Lotus Fairy was of course nothing. After all, he had even killed a powerful being like the headmaster of Academy and the Sword God. After all, he had killed all the previous divine emperors. There was nothing he didn't dare to do. More importantly, he did it in front of Songming. The meaning was completely different. This was completely disregarding Songming. As the uncle and master of the old ruins emperor and a genius who had dominated 3 eras, how could such a person tolerate Jiang Tian's disrespect? You're asking for death, aunt. Sure enough, Songming was enraged. His eyes were almost spitting fire and a monstrous murderous intent swept out from his body like waves. It shook the sky, dimmed the stars and covered the sun and the moon. Jiang Tian only replied with one word. Fight. The ultimate battle that involved 2 universal civilizations, the ownership of dozens of planets, and even the solar system 4 light-years away had begun. Chapter 1655. Boom. The 2 of them tore through space and transformed into 2 streaks of black light. They crossed dozens of kilometers and collided in the blink of an eye. Song Ming's cultivation base was close to the half-step void return realm. However, he had yet to cross that threshold and his lifespan was already depleted. Previously, he had used techniques such as condensing his blood and sealing his lifespan in a mystical crystal to barely maintain his life force. Although his aura surged and his terrifying dermic powers surged, Jiang Tian could clearly sense the thick aura of death emanating from his body. The stench of decay was several times stronger than that of the previous divine emperors. Right now, he could be considered half human and half corpse. In other words, he was a living dead. This technique that forcibly extended one's lifespan could not be interrupted easily. Once it was interrupted, one would not be able to enter a dormant state again. The combat strength that he was displaying now was like the final radiance of a dying man. After this battle, what awaited him would be death. Song Ming was clearly aware of this as well. Thus, he used his full strength and held nothing back. He wanted to kill Jiang Tian and unleash his final glory. He wanted to destroy this calamity and bring peace to his descendants. Rip. A golden spear mysteriously appeared in Song Ming's hand. This spear was engraved with countless Dao patterns and talisman arrays. The patterns were complex. There were flowers, birds, insects, fish, ferocious beasts and birds. There were also images of ancient people working and divine beings running amok. It was all-encompassing and seemed to contain the great Tao of an entire world. At the same time, countless chains formed from the great Tao of nomological laws wrapped around the spear handle. This made the spear appear even heavier and heavier, as if it could affect the entire world. These chains extended into the depths of the void and seemed to be connected to the entire galaxy. The spear pierced forward violently. It was sharp and incisive. Heaven and earth rumbled as the power of the entire world seemed to converge on this spear. A true holy weapon. Jiang Tian's eyes narrowed. A so-called holy weapon could contain all the nomological laws of a world or a complete great Tao. As long as one could activate it, one could control the corresponding nomological power of that world. Its power was boundless. For example, the sword god's so-called holy weapon, the flying immortal sword, was actually not a true holy weapon. It only contained a segment of the great Tao. It was incomplete and its power was limited. The golden spear in Song Ming's hand was a true Dharma treasure used by void return cultivators in the universe. It was far superior to the so-called Tao artifacts and true artifacts in the ruins of immortality. Jiang Tian instantly came to the conclusion that this magical item didn't come from the ruins of immortality era. This was because even the spiritual qi in the ruins of immortality was unable to nourish such a sacred weapon. This should be a weapon from the era of the wood spirit planet, where the cultivation civilization was even more prosperous. Today, you should feel honored to die under the tyrannical golden spear bestowed by the tyrannical emperor of the wood spirit dynasty. Song Ming roared. His killing intent was dense. His spear drew upon the great Tao laws of the ruins of immortality. Boundless power condensed into a single strike that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. Kill! Jiang Tian didn't hold back either. Inside his spirit embryo, his nascent soul roared towards the sky. The primal chaos divine disk behind him spun rapidly, shining brightly like a star. The blood qi in his body boiled and his divine body flashed, releasing thousands of rays of light. Countless gems and diamond-like spots could be seen through the surface of his body. He threw a punch. The divine laws of the primal chaos filled the sky and were extremely powerful. Can you resist the power of an entire world? Song Ming roared with a mocking tone and his golden spear shook. At that moment, the 3,000 great Tao and endless Dharma laws seemed to have been extracted from the ruins of immortality and gathered at the tip of the Song Ming spear. A world appeared with a single strike. Then, a complete star of the ruins of immortality appeared. This star had a radius of 10 miles and was overflowing with essence chi. Mountains and rivers could be seen on it, and every blade of grass and tree could be seen clearly. The birds and beasts looked extremely lifelike as they pressed down on Jiang Tian with a thunderous momentum, extracting the Dharma laws and great Tao of a planet and gathering them into a world with the power of an entire world to form a world-destroying attack. This is really the work of a god. At that moment, the entire ruins of immortality was in an uproar. Prince Xia was so excited that his body trembled and he knelt on the ground. Countless members of the royal family and nobles shouted, "Long live the ancestral patriarch!" Indeed, Dharma laws and Dharma laws were the root and foundation of a world. They were extremely solid and indestructible. Soul formation cultivators were so powerful that they could move mountains, fill oceans, and form rivers. The outstanding ones could even refine planets and shatter moons. And yet, those soul formation cultivators still couldn't go beyond this planet. After he died, he still had to return to the heavens and return everything to this world. How many soul formation cultivators had been born on this planet in the history? There were countless of them. It could be said that the power of a planet was comparable to that of millions of soul formation cultivators. And then, the extremely powerful planet of the ruins of immortality had been extracted by a grand divine power and condensed into a shape to attack. How terrifying was that? It seemed to be able to annihilate everything. Even if only 1/10,000th of it was extracted, it would be extremely terrifying. It could injure a void return cultivator and kill a soul formation cultivator as easily as killing a dog. With ancestral patriarch Song Ming here, the ruins of immortality will be safe. Even the heavenly river star sovereign relaxed at this moment. Kong Taichu wouldn't be able to withstand that last trump card. Be careful, Senior Taichu. Heavenly the arch. At this moment, the warriors standing on Jiang Tian's side were so nervous that their scalps went numb and their hearts were about to explode. Long Shengnan and Bai Mushue's beautiful faces turned pale. Their beautiful eyes were filled with worry, and they were filled with tears. Then, in the sky, the vast and majestic silhouette of the ruins of immortality was like a continent pressing down, soaring into the sky and smashing down fiercely towards Jiang Tian. With a clang, it smashed onto Jiang Tian's body. Such a vast power could destroy the world. Jiang Tian's body was smashed to the point that it cracked. Terrifying cracks appeared on his body. He even opened his mouth and spurted out a mouthful of blood. Even the stone cauldron flew to the side. The illusory image of the ruins of immortality erupted with countless laws. The laws of flame burned, the laws of the mortal world interfered with his mind, and the laws of thunder exploded in the clouds, sending out arcs of lightning that firmly wrapped around Jiang Tian like an octopus protecting its prey. Jiang Tian was severely injured in one move. Jiang Tian's chaotic divine body was only at the early stage and it wasn't comparable to the power of the stars. Controlling or matching a planet with life was the power of a void-returning saint. How terrifying! How terrifying! Yun Zhongzi looked serious and his eyes were full of worry. Song Ming was indeed a soul formation cultivator and hadn't reached the void-returning level. But the problem was that he had been at the soul formation level for too long. His foundation was extremely solid and his understanding of the Dharma laws had reached an unprecedented level. He could be said to be the peak of the peak and the ultimate of the Dharma laws. That was why he could use a real sacred weapon and mobilize the Dharma laws and Dharma laws of the entire ruins of immortality. I'm going to kill this old coffin ladle. Tian Shu, who had a sharp mouth and a monkey's cheeks, was also furious after drinking. He waved his saber and said that he would fight Song Ming to the death. The battle might be over by the time you get there. Bai Muxue tried to persuade him gently while holding back her grief and anxiety. In fact, no one could help in a battle of this level. They would only be cannon fodder if they went. Kill! Song Ming didn't show any mercy. The golden spear of the Overlord Emperor shone brightly, as if many small suns were rising in the dark night. The miniature ruins of immortality, formed by the Dharma laws and Dharma laws, jumped and fell. It was as if Mars had crashed into Earth. It came crashing down with the force of a thunderbolt and an aura that could destroy everything. Open! Jiang Tian yelled and waved his right hand. The stone cauldron fell into his hand. He stomped his foot in the air, and the curvature of space appeared to bend. It was as if the invisible space had become material and was pressed down like a spring. After that, Jiang Tian used the recoil force of the curvature of space to soar into the sky. At this moment, the chaotic stone cauldron suddenly expanded to the size of a small mountain. However, compared to the 3 kilometers tall Jiang Tian, it seemed to be very suitable and harmonious. The expanded chaotic stone cauldron was like a craggy mountain, but one could still see that the cauldron, 2 handles, and 3 legs seemed to contain the truth of Tao that gave birth to 1, 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, and 3 gave birth to all things. Moreover, it emitted the aura of the beginning of all things. It was full of vitality as if it could split the world apart and give birth to all things. Chaotic chi coiled and surged around the cauldron. It hung down like silk and swept across like a waterfall. There were many sparkling and translucent specks of light that were dazzling and magnificent to the extreme. They were like rivers of stars. Its might was extremely strong, and its energy was extremely condensed and vast. A single strand could crush a mountain, and a strand could sweep across the continent. Every single talisman marking was extremely miraculous and profound. Some were powerful like true dragons, some were unrestrained like heavenly phoenixes, some were heavy like tortoises, and some were imposing and mighty like cheilants. Iron hooks and silver strokes, majestic and powerful. Every stroke was heaven-shaking. Every word and sentence was divine. Suddenly, in the depths of the void, somewhere unknown, there seemed to be a ghost whispering and a Buddha sighing sound that seemed to be close at hand, but also seemed to be far away on the horizon. At this time, many people noticed. Every time Tsang Ming waved his spear to write a rune, the ruins of immortality, where the great Tao and the laws of nature converged, became a little smaller. In the end, it almost disappeared without a trace. With the tyrant emperor's golden spear as the brush and the myriad Taos of the ruins of immortality as the ink, I've exhausted them all. What is he doing by writing those mystical runes? At this time, Yun Zhongzi, Niu Duotian, and the other veterans of the Jianghu had solemn expressions. Their brows were tightly furrowed, and their hearts were in their mouths. Logically speaking, the object condensed from the great Tao and the laws of the ruins of immortality should be Tsang Ming's final trump card. However, he had destroyed even the great Tao and the laws of the ruins of immortality, which was equivalent to tearing apart his own trump card. What was his purpose? Why do I feel that these runes are very ancient, as if they're summoning some mighty figure? Could it be? Bai Muxue suddenly felt alarmed as she thought of a terrifying possibility, but she also found it unbelievable. What is Patriarch Tsang Ming doing? Prince Xiahe asked in confusion. Everyone was puzzled. If I'm not wrong, he's using a kind of soul-summoning technique. Star Lord Tianhe's eyes lit up, and his face was filled with fanaticism as he said word by word, "The spirit of the Overlord." What? Those legends are true. The spirit of the Overlord still exists? Everyone was shocked and filled with disbelief. Is it true? Then we're definitely going to win. Prince Xiahe was already full of excitement. Legend had it that the Overlord was not only the Overlord of the human race and had the blood of the Overlord of the heavens, but he was also a wise ruler. He had pacified a chaotic world, swept away all his enemies in the chaotic apocalypse, established order, and formed a dynasty to solve the problem of the third planet of the South Gate. He persevered until the last moment, but due to the explosion of the third planet, he turned into a rain of light and disappeared in the starry sky. However, he loved this land and his people so much that he refused to die, and his remnant soul continued to wander in the South Gate galaxy. Before the age of Tao damage, which was when the wanderers of the deity land had yet to reach the space city of the South Gate 2 stars, Song Ming accidentally summoned the remnant soul of the Overlord. With the help of this remnant soul, he was invincible and was not even afraid of the void-returned sages of the ancient heavenly court. After the establishment of the ruins of Immortality dynasty, Song Ming turned this remnant soul into a great Tao and integrated it into the great Tao of the ruins of Immortality. This remnant soul had been nourished by the world for tens of thousands of years and had become extremely powerful. Now that it was summoned, it was terrifying. Boom! A throne descended from the void. This throne was actually weaved from vines, with green leaves and colorful flowers growing on it. It looked very powerful, but it also gave people a feeling of verdure and cuteness. An emperor descended. He wore a Chinese redbud crown on his head and a green Taoist robe embroidered with all kinds of pictures of plants and trees. He was hunched over and his skin was shriveled. He looked very old and his hair was white and curly. However, there was a terrifying aura of an emperor that was many times more powerful than that of the previous emperors. His body rumbled as the aura of the overlord blood of the heavens surged, as if it could crush mountains and rivers. Could this be the terrifying aura of a sage? I heard that the overlord had reached the void return sage stage, but I didn't expect him to be so powerful. Everyone couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Even the heavenly river lord couldn't resist that kind of aura. Spirit of the overlord, please listen to the prayers of your people and slay the evildoers. Song Ming chanted an incantation. Although Song Ming could control the remnant soul of the overlord and make it listen to his orders, the overlord was still his ancestor and an emperor, so he still respected him very much. At this moment, the tyrant emperor's remnant soul changed form. His waist instantly stopped moving like a javelin, and his muscles swelled up. He was incomparably strong and tall, and his aura was unparalleled. His white hair turned black, flying against the wind as he charged towards Jiang Tian. Although he was a remnant soul and didn't have a physical body, he was already a part of the great Tao of the ruins of immortality. He could manipulate the laws and great Tao, and was even more terrifying than Song Ming. Abandoned ant, I don't know why you're fighting. Back then, your ancestors were just abandoned people abandoned by the Sheng and Ao emperors. Is it so important to avenge them? Song Ming's silver hair danced in the wind, and his curved fingernails cracked the space. He stared at Jiang Tian with his scarlet eyes full of mockery. It was still a spiritual battle, and he wanted to break Jiang Tian's fighting spirit. Revenge is not important. However, it is very important to make you disappear from this world. Jiang Tian snorted and charged at the overlord's remnant soul. Is it you? A mere nascent soul cultivator? I can stab you to death with a finger. The overlord's remnant soul roared with arrogance. His majestic body stood between heaven and earth. It was formed by the laws, but it still showed his glory when he was alive. His body seemed to be made of precious gold, and he was strong and powerful. It was as if he could reach the heavens and intimidate the 9 underworlds. His eyes seemed to have the sun and moon moving, and the galaxy surging. They were extremely deep. He charged at Jiang Tian at a seemingly slow speed. With every step he took, rocks flew and the void trembled. The ground within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was shaking, and all living things were trembling. Even if the countless arrays in the ruins' emperor's palace were activated, they still felt uncomfortable. He possessed the overlord's blood and was known as the unparalleled overlord body. It was true that he was too powerful, and he was talented and bold. He had once dominated an era. At that moment, a remnant soul exuded a monstrous aura, as if a demon god had descended and could suppress all soul formation cultivators. Is that so? You're just a remnant soul. You still haven't given up? Aren't you ashamed that you have brought up despicable and shameless descendants like the teacher and the ruins emperor? Jiang Tian mocked without any mercy. The continuation of civilization is more important than anything else. Survival is also more important than anything else. The Great Tao is merciless, and it treats all living things like dogs. Before the terrifying power of nature, all living things are but ants. In the face of the apocalypse, they found a place to stay and occupied it. They took advantage of the enemy's weakness and stole their wives and daughters. They rested in their beds in their palaces and enjoyed their treasures. That is the joy of life. The overlord roared loudly with a hint of madness. He had never felt so happy and satisfied. Chapter 1657. The firework plan, speaking of it, was solemn and tragic, moving people. But in fact, it was an expansion plan. Only the tyrant emperor and the others, who knew how difficult it was to survive, understood the importance of expanding and occupying more living space. The tyrant emperor's life could only be summed up in 2 words: expansion. Ha, tyrant emperor, your vision is too limited. Although you know that the Great Tao is ruthless, you don't know that man can conquer nature. You don't understand the tenacity of humanity and the power of cultivation. I've seen a Tao reunion perfected immortal who used a planet as a marble and crushed the sun with 1 finger. I've also seen a celestial lord who used a galaxy as a bathtub and a star as a pillow. Jiang Tian said mockingly, if you can reach the Tao reunion level or even the tribulation transcendence, you can easily destroy the 3rd planet of the South Gate. You're just a coward who can't solve your own problems, so you shifted the crisis to a neighboring planet. People call you the tyrant emperor of the heavens and your unparalleled strength. Some say you created the world and were a wise ruler. But in my eyes, you're just trash. Not only did he say that, but he also showed the memories of his previous life to everyone. Are you really the reincarnation of a deity from the 9 heavens? The tyrant emperor was dumbfounded and stopped in his tracks. His face was full of disbelief. With his ability, he could tell the difference between the memories and imagination. He knew that these were Jiang Tian's real memories. He had never thought that Jiang Tian would be so powerful. Maybe cooperating with Jiang Tian could really solve the crisis of the ruins of immortality peacefully. Ancestral patriarch, you can't retreat. He's using his mental strength to break your will to fight. Suddenly, Song Ming and Heavenly River Lord communicated with each other. Unfortunately, it's too late. You must die. A trace of regret flashed across the tyrant emperor's face and he shook his head. Suddenly, his eyes became cruel again and there was a peerless murderous intent in them. Just looking at his eyes was enough to make people feel as if their brains were about to explode. He sped up and headed toward Jiang Tian. His every move and every word was filled with boundless dominance. He was brimming with an aura of supremacy that looked down on all living things in the world. It made people tremble in fear. You're just a remnant soul. If he had fought me at his peak, I would have had to be cautious. If I want to kill you now, it will be as easy as cutting grass. Jiang Tian humphed. His gaze was calm, but it was also filled with extreme disdain and indifference. I am a pure spiritual body, and I use a wisp of my soul to affect the great Tao of the ruins of immortality. Let's not talk about other things, just in terms of mental strength. In the entire Milky Way, I am absolutely invincible. The tyrannical emperor's divine soul was extremely conceited. Mental strife? You're still far from it. Kill! Jiang Tian said softly. Suddenly, the golden lake on his forehead rippled, and the soul devourer's divine sense burst out. No matter how strong you are, can you be stronger than the hell-suppressing devil soul? Under everyone's shocked gaze, the soul devourer's divine sense gushed out like black jelly. These divine senses were endless and there were more and more of them. At first, they were like tentacles waving randomly, then like raging waves hitting the shore and rivers flowing across the river. In the end, they formed the body of a demon god as tall as a mountain. They saw it. This divine soul was 100,000 feet tall, wearing a set of dark purple armor. On the armor, there were extremely sharp-boned spurs protruding from the roots, emitting a cold light, which made people dizzy just by looking at it. Above its head, between 2 curved long horns, Countless thick thunder dragons swam back and forth. 9 devil heads, snake heads, ghost heads, and dragon heads that were either shrouded in black gas, white bones, or covered in scales crawled out of the coiled muscles on his back. They roared and roared violently and ferociously, dancing in the air like arms, rolling and rolling non-stop, and changing rapidly. Under the contrast of this tall demon god's soul, the overlord's divine soul, which was only 1,000 feet tall, felt like a chicken egg under Mount Tai, unable to withstand a single blow. Damn it! You said that this person might have a human body, but it's the most terrifying demon body in the universe. Song Ming, you've misled me. The overlord shouted in panic and turned around to tear open the sky, trying to escape. It's too late, Jiang Tian said. Under his feet, the hell-suppressing devil's soul roared and the 9 demon heads on its back reached out, reaching into the sky and grabbing the overlord's divine soul. There was a miserable scream with unwillingness, despair, and deep fear. The overlord's remnant soul didn't even have the strength to resist and was torn to pieces. At this moment, terrifying soul blood tainted the sky. Large pieces of the body fell like giant rocks and pieces of organs fell like rain. The scene was extremely shocking. That's the overlord's spirit, but it was killed? Everyone was dumbfounded and disbelief was written all over their faces. But they didn't know. Soul Devourer was one of the strongest soul energy in the universe, not to mention that it had been strengthened by Jiang Tian into the hell-suppressing devil soul. It could be said that at this moment, even in the fiend realm, his soul energy was ranked among the top. Not many demons could compete with him. This was also the result of Jiang Tian's seclusion during this period of time to break through to the 3rd level of the nascent soul level. He had killed too many people in the ruins of immortality, and the number of souls he had collected was as vast as the sea. And those cultivators from the ruins of immortality who happened to die were unrepentant, arrogant, and cruel people. Their divine souls were filled with hatred and hatred. And these thoughts were the easiest to form the power of the fiend soul. Ever since Nieming Yuan's demon body purified the Soul Devourer's divine soul, Jiang Tian's Soul Devourer's power hadn't improved much. Although it wasn't completely compatible with the chaotic divine body, it was still useful. Avenging the ancestors of the ancient heavenly courts isn't important. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. Destroying you is the most important thing. The ruins of immortality dynasty coveted Earth, and that's why you must die. Jiang Tian shouted, and the suppressing hell demon godly soul opened its bloody mouth. In an instant, it devoured the remnant soul of the tyrant emperor. If you dare to look at me and have a trace of covetousness, I'll turn your world upside down and destroy your country. Jiang Tian's eyes were as sharp as knives and his black hair flowed down like a waterfall. He stepped in the air and appeared in front of Song Ming. Jiang Tian ignored his desperate wails and the fragmented ruins of immortality that he hurriedly summoned. Jiang Tian directly slammed his palm down, enveloping the world. Today, I'll kill all of you and get rid of all future troubles. With a majestic roar, the giant hand covered the sky and the sun and the chaotic energy lingered around. Song Ming was completely unable to resist this dominating palm strike. He sprawled on the ground like a toad and looked as if he would be crushed at any moment. The gunmetal divine palm art Jiang Tian used contained an indestructible energy and was extremely heavy. However, he used chaotic energy and dharma laws, which were 100 times heavier than before. How terrifying was it? Song Ming's armor cracked under the pressure and his mask fell off as well, revealing his withered and rotten skin. Fight! Song Ming was extremely angry and unwilling to give up. He was determined to kill Jiang Tian. Through the immortal will of the others, he already knew that the expedition of the ruins of immortality had arrived in the solar system thousands of years ago. The expedition of the ruins of immortality would never coexist peacefully with the solar system. They would exterminate the human race on Earth and turn it into their own habitat. So Jiang Tian had to die there. Otherwise, Jiang Tian would definitely return to Earth after destroying the ruins of immortality. After all, that was his ancestral land. And with Jiang Tian's strength and personality of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance, he would definitely wipe out the entire expeditionary army, leaving no survivors. By then, the ruins of immortality would have been devoured by the third planet of the South Gate. It would mean that the entire civilization of the ruins of immortality would be destroyed. As he roared furiously, Song Ming's gaze became resolute, and his killing intent moved the heavens and the earth. The Overlord golden spear in his hand stirred up a myriad of laws and grand daos. Every single strike of his was like a torrential river that smashed down, like a mountain that soared through the sky, and possessed boundless strength as he charged once more towards Jiang Tian. Chapter 1658. Bang Bang Bang. Jiang Tian and ancestral patriarch Song Ming fought at lightning speed. Every time, an earth-shattering explosion occurred. Every attack shook 10,000 miles. The city walls that had existed for a long time were smashed and countless powerful buildings were torn to pieces. The entire ruins of immortal land had become a ruin. Back off. Back off. Many soul formation cultivators in the city couldn't take it anymore and hid in secret rooms. Many nascent soul cultivators and golden core cultivators were turned into blood mist. They didn't even have a chance to run away. So powerful. That's the power of a peak-stage soul formation cultivator. Everyone exclaimed. They felt dizzy and their minds were in a daze. The two of them were showing power that was much more powerful than normal soul formation cultivators. They were almost at the peak of the soul formation cultivator level. In the end, the two of them flew out of the gravitational field and continued to fight tens of thousands of miles away. Even the Tianmong Grotto heaven, which had formed a world of its own, was crushed by the two of them. It was as if a planet had exploded and fell from the sky, shaking the earth and mountains. Kuan Peng destruction. Jiang Tian's desire to fight was boiling. His eyes were cold and his killer's intent reached its limit. He took out the absolute heaven sword and slashed horizontally. How terrifying was the Kuan Peng divine law and the deity artifact, the heavenly sword. Countless asteroids in outer space were shattered by this sword strike. They turned into resplendent meteors and pierced through the atmosphere. Song Ming was startled. He raised the Emperor's divine spear and countless beams of light burst out. That was the manifestation of Dharma laws. But it was still not enough. It was cut in half and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. Kong Teichu, if you didn't have the ancient treasure left by Emperor Zhongli, you wouldn't have been able to defeat me. Song Ming was injured and his waist was cut in half. He performed the swordsman art to heal his wounds, but there were still deep wounds and terrifying blood spilled out. Even though the swordsman heavenly art was the best in the ruins of deity and he had cultivated it to the peak, it was still difficult to heal. The Dharma laws left by the heavenly sword and the divine law of the Kuan Peng were too strong. The swordsman art couldn't destroy them at all. Damn it. This is a battle of life and death. Where were the rules? There was no need to talk so much nonsense. Why are you still shooting your mouth off? If you have the guts, throw away the tyrant emperor's golden spear. Jiang Tian was speechless. Had this old fellow slept in the tomb for so long that his brain had rotted? Did they think that this was a fair competition between children? This was war. I don't care what kind of weapon you use or what kind of magical artifact you use. The holes in their hearts would become bigger. Even the heavenly river star lord didn't feel good. All kinds of tragic and shocking events struck his heart. His face was pale and filled with grief and indignation. We were so far away. Moreover, our Dao hearts were severely affected after being transformed by the Dharma artifact. Kong Teichu was the first to bear the brunt of it. He shouldn't have been able to dodge it. However, he knew how terrifying this attack was. Instead, he was very excited and happy. He had to admit that Patriarch Song Ming's spear was indeed powerful. Even with Jiang Tian's strong Dao heart and powerful divine sense, many fantasies appeared in his mind at this moment. For example, the destruction of the Jiang family in his previous life, the tragic deaths of his parents, and the scenes of Qing'er being forced to commit suicide appeared in his mind. It was as if they had happened yesterday. However, Jiang Tian knew that these were the trajectories of his previous life. In this life, apart from the fact that Huang Linger, Tang Linglong and the other girls developed feelings for him, and that the ghost kick was accidentally killed, everything else that happened was under Jiang Tian's control. Although there were twists and turns in the process, the endings were mostly perfect. Therefore, Jiang Tian's eyes only flashed with a hint of grief. He smiled coldly and changed from defense to offense. He slashed out with his sword. Kun Peng Divine Law, 8th Law, Yin Yang Split. As he slashed out with his sword, the sword light twisted and turned like the dividing line of yin and yang in the Taiji diagram. It was very smooth and beautiful. It looked exceptionally harmonious and beautiful. However, it was extremely fast and peerless. It rushed past like a bolt of lightning and cut through Patriarch Tsang Ming's tragic sorrow like a knife cutting through water. Everyone instantly felt all kinds of sorrowful emotions and tragic avatars disappear from their minds and hearts. They instantly felt relieved. How can your Tao heart be so strong? Tsang Ming was shocked and couldn't believe it. Who didn't have regrets in their life? Even the emperors and mighty figures had things they regretted. Who didn't have guilt in their life? Who could have a clear conscience? Who didn't have demons in their hearts? Those so-called gods of slaughter usually had extreme and stubborn thoughts in their hearts. Otherwise, how could they go against the heavens and kill gods? Blood would flow for 1,000 miles and millions of corpses would fall? Remorse, regret, guilt, extreme thoughts and stubbornness and other negative emotions would create loopholes in one's Tao heart. The tragic sorrow spear art was used to awaken those memories, strengthen those negative emotions and interfere with one's Tao heart, eventually triggering demons. He had dominated many planets and suppressed 3 eras. That spear attack had always been successful and at least 10 soul formation grand cultivators had died under it. But they didn't know. Jiang Tian had lived 2 lives and he had taken revenge for all his enemies. Since he was reborn, he had always been straightforward and carefree. As for killing, Jiang Tian had seen too many civilizations destroyed in his previous life. His Tao heart was like iron and he didn't feel guilty at all when he killed those people. He was completely calm. Go to hell with your questions. Jiang Tian didn't show any mercy. He slashed with the heavenly sword continuously, as if he wanted to kill all living beings and destroy the world. Open the chaos. Crack the sky. Break the galaxy. Every slash from Jiang Tian was accompanied by the Kun Peng Divine Law. The air was destroyed and the dimension was cut open. The entire world seemed to be collapsing. Jiang Tian was like an ancient sage who had come back to life with the heavenly sword in his hand. He slashed across the galaxy and cut open the world, creating a future for himself. Even someone as strong as Tsang Ming found himself in a difficult situation when facing Jiang Tian, who was showing off his abilities and charging forward courageously, unable to hold on. The Kun Peng Divine Law transformed into a Kun Peng. Then, it stretched into an extremely thin and sharp golden line and slashed out. Tsang Ming was forced to retreat again and again. The crystallization of the laws of the ruins of immortality that he had summoned was sent flying and shattered time and time again. His armor, which had originated from the primordial era and had clearly been tempered by the flames of war and was still incomparably tough, had been slashed into pieces. His physical body forcefully healed time and time again, but it was cut open again and again. Heavy sacred blood dyed the sky red. How can his Dharma laws be so powerful? They're 10 times more terrifying than the sword god from the Big Dipper. Tsang Ming yelled in his mind. Chapter 1659. Tsang Ming's spear techniques were nothing compared to Jiang Tian's sword techniques. The difference between his laws and Jiang Tian's was like the difference between heaven and earth. They were on completely different levels, just like the difference between a mortal and an immortal. He might be able to master his spear techniques and sword techniques quickly. However, he was also suppressed by Jiang Tian in terms of laws and great Taos. This was unacceptable to him. One had to know that high-level laws and great Taos had to be forged steadily and undergo countless trials and hardships before they could be formed. Tsang Ming had experienced the tyrant emperor, Tao loss, and the ruins of immortality. He had lived for tens of thousands of years and had cultivated diligently and fought endlessly. Although he was only at the soul formation stage, he had already mastered all of the laws and great daos of the ruins of immortality. Moreover, he had tempered them to become extremely condensed and heavy. He was confident that he could even match a half-step return to void stage cultivator. Therefore, he thought highly of himself and had never taken the cultivators of the ruins of immortality seriously. In fact, he didn't even take the supreme-grade cultivation techniques of the sword god of the ruins Emperor's Palace seriously. However, when he faced Jiang Tian, he felt that his laws were like a piece of paper meeting a steel knife when they met Jiang Tian's laws. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Under Jiang Tian's suppression, he was like a toddler learning how to walk facing a ferocious and strong man. He was exhausted and kept retreating. Clang, whoosh, boom. In the end, Jiang Tian even shot out the 9 divine law flowers. Occasionally, the vermilion bird divine law would erupt and burn Song Ming's blood and qi to the point that it almost dried up. Just as he tried to resist, Jiang Tian slashed with his sword and slashed out with the sea-calming divine law. Thousands of miles of ice were sealed and frost covered the sky. Song Ming was completely frozen and motionless like a dead fish in ice. His eyes were stunned and he was at the mercy of Jiang Tian. Even if he used the attainment secret of the 9 great heavenly techniques of the ruins of immortality, he could only pull out a few invisible cracks in the confined space. He couldn't escape at all. Kill! Jiang Tian's face was gloomy and his eyes were cold. He wantonly swung his sword 7 or 8 times in a row, sweeping horizontally and chopping vertically as if he was cutting a fruit. Song Ming's waist was broken, and his limbs and head flew into the air. His various organs fluttered about chaotically. 1. Song Ming roared madly and used all his strength to condense a physical body with great difficulty. At this moment, his entire body was covered in cracks that interweaved with each other. His wounds were like the lips of a child, and they were dripping with blood and flesh. His hair was disheveled, and his face was hideous and warped, coupled with the aura of death that coiled around his entire body, causing him to seem like a malicious spirit. At this moment, his heart was already filled with despair. If Kang Teichu were to kill him, then no one in the ruins of immortality would be able to stop him. Kang Teichu would have no problem occupying the ruins of immortality. The key was that he would turn around and attack Earth. The expeditionary army of the ruins of immortality would be wiped out, and the entire civilization would be destroyed. I can die. But Kang Teichu must also die. This was the only thought left in Song Ming's mind. Self-destructing deity. Song Ming's eyes flashed with a wild and ferocious light. He was like a ferocious demon god. Suddenly, the broken spear in his hand trembled. It tore through space and moved about. At times, it was like a great rock soaring through the blue sky. At other times, it was like a tiger or a leopard galloping through the forest. It flashed past the numerous phantoms of laws and charged towards Jiang Tian. Kang Teichu, you must die today. Just as he was less than a mile away from Jiang Tian, his eyes became fierce and he was about to self-destruct and perish together with Jiang Tian. Suddenly he realized that Jiang Tian had disappeared like a ghost. Where is he? Large drops of cold sweat dripped from Song Ming's forehead with blood. He only felt a chill in his heart. He did not see how Jiang Tian had disappeared. Crystal sand galaxy hanging in the azure sky. Jiang Tian suddenly appeared 100 meters above Song Ming's head. He waved his hand and thousands of Milky Way crystal sand poured down like a waterfall. Most importantly, it also carried the source stone cauldron with it. Boom! The source stone cauldron was as heavy as a mountain and it came crashing down. Song Ming tried to dodge it, but he was already flustered. He felt the pressure and difficulty. What was more terrifying was that the huge mountains formed by the Milky Way crystal sand were flying up and down, crashing down on him from all directions. Even if he used the Overlord Emperor's golden spear, he could only create a few small cracks. He could not break through them and escape. But he did not know. These Milky Way crystal sand were extraordinary. Strictly speaking, each grain had the power of a planet. Although Tsang Ming was powerful, he could only control the great Tao of a planet. He could not transcend or destroy it. I can't accept this. Back then, I killed the Ao Emperor with one strike of my spear. Many ancient sages, including many Void Return saints, were also killed by me. How can I be defeated by a junior? Moreover, he is an abandoned person of the wasteland. His bloodline is lowly and he is like an ant. Tsang Ming roared and his eyes widened. But he could not change reality.